Love Between Us bonus story. A Sweet Gum Meadows African-American sweet romance short story. Written by Imani Price, narrated by Shatrice Williams and Michael Evans. Chapter 1. Kim paused at the entrance to Rochelle's old-fashioned diner, taking in the comforting hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh peach cobbler wafting through the open doorway. For a moment, she let her gaze wander over the familiar black and white checkerboard floor, the shiny red booths, and the vintage jukebox near the wall. Sweet Gum Meadows had been her home for years, and this diner was its beating heart. Tonight, it pulsed with tender smiles and bittersweet laughter. "Come on in, honey," Rochelle called from behind the counter. The diner's owner, who was like an older sister to Kim, wiped her hands on her apron and beckoned her forward. "We're all here." Kim's heart squeezed with affection. She could see the members of her book club, her found family, gathered around the biggest booth, eyes bright with warmth and well wishes. The overhead lights glinted off the silver in Mrs. Zhang's hair as she beckoned Kim closer, while Neveh, Courtney, Brandy, and Joanne scooted aside to make space. And there, at the corner of the table, sat India, Kim's best friend since they were kids. India's wide, sad eyes threatened to undo Kim's carefully maintained composure. The women burst into smiles and exclamations the moment Kim stepped forward with Malik's arm draped gently around her waist. Malik, tall and quietly self-assured, offered a wave in greeting. The small group peppered him with questions before he could even sit. "I'm so proud of you guys," Mrs. Zhang said, nodding appreciatively. "It's not every day a park ranger and a masterful hairdresser set off to see America's national parks." Neve tapped her painted nails against the tabletop. "I still can't believe you're actually leaving, Kim," she said, voice edged with playful disbelief. "Make sure you post pictures of you two hiking, climbing mountains, or whatever it is y'all do out there in the wild." "Oh, she definitely will," Courtney teased. Knowing Kim, she'll be braiding her hair in front of every scenic overlook just to get more likes on social. Kim laughed and let her gaze travel around the booth. "I'm going to miss all of you so much," she murmured. "But you know how important this trip is. Malik's been wanting to see his old home in New Hampshire, and then we're off westward for more parks." Brandy, who was sitting beside Courtney, reached across the table to squeeze Kim's hand. "We get it. You've always been adventurous. Plus, we know you'll bring back new hairstyles inspired by all that nature." She winked, and Kim felt a renewed burst of excitement about showcasing her braiding skills against the backdrop of majestic mountains and forests. Joanne gave Malik a friendly grin. "You sure you're ready for all this traveling? Bet you never thought you'd see so many national parks in one go." Malik smiled, thoughtful but quietly radiant. "I grew up trekking up and down a mountain with my grandfather back in New Hampshire. Didn't have electricity for a long while. We lived off the land. Since coming to Georgia, I've embraced that love for nature as a park ranger." His voice softened. "Going back to Granddad's cabin will be, well, it'll be something. Might even patch things up with the family members who inherited it." A hush of understanding settled over the group. Kim leaned into Malik, gently tracing her fingertips over his shoulder in support. "I want to be there for him," she explained, "and maybe learn new outdoor skills along the way. I'll keep up my hair work, but this is about Malik's roots. It's about us sharing everything we love together." India, who had been listening in subdued silence, cleared her throat. "You know I'm happy for you." Her lower lip trembled despite her reassuring smile. "I'm just going to miss having my best friend around. Who else is going to listen to me rant about the silliest little things?" Kim rounded the table, pulling India into a tight hug. "I'll call all the time," she promised, "and text and send postcards with pictures of me looking all crazy after a long hike, so you'll have a good laugh." India sniffled, but a genuine smile broke through. "You better," she said, "or I'll hunt you down in whatever park you're hiding in." A burst of affectionate laughter rippled through them. Rochelle, hovering nearby with a tray of strawberry lemonade, set them down and raised a glass in an impromptu toast. "To Kim and Malik, may your journey be as sweet as the love between you." The women lifted their cups, murmuring agreement and sending fervent well wishes to the couple. With a final clink of glasses, Kim blinked back a tear, her chest tightening at the sight of these beloved friends. Malik slipped his arm around her shoulders, steady as a mountainside. "Thank you," he said quietly. His gaze traveled around the booth, meeting each set of encouraging eyes. "We won't be gone forever, but we'll carry Sweet Gum Meadows in our hearts wherever we go." Outside, dusk turned the sky into watercolor shades of pink and gold. Arm in arm, Kim and Malik stepped from the diner, guided by the glow of neon lights. Behind them, the warm chatter of the book club continued, voices she would forever associate with comfort and home. Their travels beckoned, and with one last wave at the window, where India and Rochelle stood sending them off, Kim and Malik headed out into the settling night, hearts brimming with hope for the journey ahead.
Chapter 2. Malik lingered by the worn SUV with one hand resting on the hood, the other tucked into the pocket of his jacket. The parking lot outside Rochelle's diner was nearly empty now, and a hush settled over Sweet Gum Meadows as the last of the evening's guests trickled home. He could still feel a pleasant warmth in his chest whenever he replayed Kim's laughter inside the diner. He caught himself smiling at the thought. He glanced toward the diner's glass doors, half expecting to see her stepping out. She had gone back in for a moment, needing just one more goodbye, a final promise that she would stay in touch with India, who struggled to hide her sadness. The night air felt crisp on Malik's skin, and he inhaled deeply, letting the cool breeze sharpen his senses. Beneath the tranquility, his thoughts tugged him northward. As much as he had grown to love Georgia, he couldn't deny the pull of New Hampshire. Memories of his grandfather rose unbidden. The sight of the old cabin at the foot of the mountain, the way the wind cut through the evergreens in winter, and that feeling of total quiet when the sun went down. He had been just a kid back then, but the lessons took root. How to track deer, find edible herbs, and navigate a world without electricity. Those were the memories that shaped him into who he was now, a man who craved the peace of nature more than the bustle of city life. His gaze shifted from the diner's lights to the quiet streets beyond. Leaving Sweet Gum Meadows wasn't as simple as packing and driving off. The town had been a haven, a place where he felt less alone after losing his grandfather. It was here that he had grown into a park ranger, teaching locals and visitors alike about the importance of preserving trails and wildlife. The people of this community had embraced him. Rochelle, who always asked if he'd eaten, Mrs. Zhang, eager to offer hot meals and motherly advice, and Kim herself, the biggest reason he'd set down any roots in Georgia at all. But this trip felt necessary. His grandfather's passing had left him with unresolved family ties, namely the relative who'd inherited the cabin. Malik wondered if they could find understanding now, or if the cabin would remain a sore subject for everyone involved. For years, he'd shoved the uneasy feelings aside, telling himself it was easier not to dwell on things he couldn't change. But Kim had encouraged him to face the possibility of reconciliation, reminding him that family, however distant, was worth trying for. He heard the diner's door chime once more and turned, spotting Kim emerging under the neon glow. Even after a full evening of farewells, she still radiated that blend of excitement and warmth that first caught his attention. Her braids fell neatly around her shoulders, framing a face that looked both eager and wistful at once. She approached with a soft smile, slipping her arm around his waist in a gesture so natural he wondered if she felt his heart kick up a notch. "I think that's all the goodbyes for tonight," she said softly. "Ready?" Malik nodded, though he couldn't quite put his feelings into words. The joy of heading off on a long-anticipated trip mingled with the pang of leaving behind the folks who'd become like a second family. "Ready as I'll ever be," he said, placing a gentle hand on Kim's shoulder. They walked together to the passenger side of the SUV, where Kim hauled her travel bag into the back seat, ensuring her hairstyling kit was secure. He knew how important her braiding tools were. She'd be sharing their travels on social media, hoping to inspire her followers with scenic backdrops and creative hairstyles. Meanwhile, he would chronicle their hikes and outdoor adventures on his YouTube channel, blending her artistry with his love for nature. In the hush of that parking lot, under the fading glow of the diner's sign, Malik found himself drawing Kim into a brief, tender embrace. He thought of the miles they would cover, from the quiet roads of New England to the red rock deserts far out west. As he climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, he felt a subtle shift, like the click of a compass needle setting a course. Whatever awaited them on the long road ahead, be it the bittersweet memories of his grandfather's cabin or the grandeur of untouched wilderness, Malik believed they would face it together. It was all he needed to know as he glanced at Kim, flashed a small, confident smile, and gently steered the SUV away from the diner that had been the heart of his life in Sweet Gum Meadows.
Chapter 3. Kim rolled down the passenger window halfway, letting the crisp night air skim across her cheeks. She and Malik had been on the highway for nearly an hour, the headlights tracing out the dark curves of the road. Every mile that slipped behind them felt surreal. Sweet Gum Meadows and Rochelle's diner were so tied to her sense of home that she kept expecting to hear the hum of chatter or see the glow of its familiar neon sign in the rearview mirror. But all that remained was the open stretch of road and the brightening stars above. She glanced sideways at Malik, steady at the wheel, focused on the gentle slope of the highway. He seemed more at ease than she had expected. Earlier, at the diner, Kim had noticed a flicker of apprehension in his eyes whenever someone wished them well, as though leaving the place they'd both come to love was no easy choice. Now, he guided the SUV with calm, practiced hands, his mind perhaps already on the mountain trails of New Hampshire. "You doing okay?" she asked softly. The radio was set to a low volume, playing a mellow jazz tune that filled the quiet between them. Malik cast her a quick, fond glance. "I'm good," he said. "Just thinking about what it'll be like up north this time of year. Been a while since I've seen a New Hampshire autumn." Kim rested an elbow on the window's ledge, smoothing a stray braid that had caught the breeze. "I've always dreamed of seeing the fall colors up there, those flaming reds and golds. It'll be perfect for photos, maybe even some new hairstyle shots," she added with a playful shrug. She tried to keep her tone light, but inside, a small flutter of anticipation stirred at the mention of the cabin and Malik's family. A half smile touched his lips. "You can post them on that channel you've been growing. Give your followers a glimpse of the outdoors they don't usually see." "I'd like that," Kim agreed, eyes drifting to the passing scenery. As the road meandered through patches of pines, she thought again about all the ways her life had changed since she'd first met Malik. His quiet love for nature had seeped into her spirit, making even the simplest roadside landscape seem like an opportunity for wonder and for creativity. She couldn't wait to braid her hair while perched on a fallen log or style a new design in front of a sunrise vista, capturing every moment for those who enjoyed her work online. She turned back to Malik, noticing the gentle frown etched along his brow. "You know," she said, voice gentle, "this trip might be about more than just the parks. You're going to see family. Even if you're not close, they're still part of you." He gave a small nod. "I'm ready," he replied, but Kim could detect a note of uncertainty. She understood. The inherited cabin was a sore topic, tied to his grandfather's legacy and the possibility of unresolved tension. She wanted him to find peace in reconnecting, to know that he hadn't lost everything in the mountains of his childhood. A moment of companionable silence followed as the SUV rumbled on, trees blurring by in the faint glow of the headlights. Eventually, Malik signaled to exit at a rest stop, a humble little gas station with a neon-lit convenience store. The sign overhead cast pink and white shapes on the asphalt below. He parked beside a pump, and they climbed out. Kim inhaled the brisk air, stretching her arms overhead. "We'll fill up here, maybe grab some snacks?" Malik shot her a quick grin. "You know I'm never one to say no to snacks." She laughed at that, remembering countless evenings in Sweet Gum Meadows where they'd curled up with takeout or rummaged through the fridge after a long hike. Times might be changing, but their simple pleasures remained the same. Inside the convenience store, Kim scanned the shelves for the perfect midnight bite, eventually settling on trail mix and fruit juice. Malik chose a couple of sandwiches, quietly remarking that they might need real meals soon. Kim agreed, stifling a yawn as they returned to the SUV. Back on the highway, they found a steady rhythm once more. Kim flipped through stations until she landed on a soft R&B track. Soon, she caught herself humming, her hand resting lightly on Malik's shoulder while he steered. The tension of the day melted into something calmer, more hopeful. "We'll take it one day at a time," she murmured. She wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself, but either way, it felt right to say. "Yeah," Malik answered, voice low and sure. "One day at a time." With that promise hanging in the cool night air, they pressed on into the darkness, two hearts full of dreams, searching out the warmth of the next sunrise, and every wonder waiting beyond the horizon.
Chapter 4. Malik awoke at dawn to the muffled hum of early highway traffic. He blinked against the morning light filtering in through the windshield, startled at first to find himself in the driver's seat, reclined back. Then he remembered. They had decided to catch a few hours of sleep at a rest area once the fatigue hit. Kim was dozing beside him, her head against the passenger window, braided hair cascading over her shoulder. The gentle rise and fall of her breath made him smile. He carefully straightened in his seat and stretched. It wasn't the most comfortable place to spend the night, but as soon as they'd pulled into that rest stop, the exhaustion from all the goodbyes and late-night driving had rolled over them in a wave. He glanced at Kim again, softly stirring, and his chest tightened in a quiet swell of affection. Not many people he knew would embark on a cross-country trip at the drop of a hat, but Kim had stepped into his world wholeheartedly, from the Georgia trails to this current quest for family roots up north. The hush of morning was broken by a rumble of an engine nearby. An old pickup pulled into a spot across from them. Malik rubbed the lingering sleep from his eyes, feeling a small thrill of anticipation for the day ahead. By noon, they would be well on their way toward the Appalachian region. The plan was to stop just shy of Washington, D.C. that evening. After that, the roads would slope upward into more familiar territory. He turned toward Kim when she gave a soft sigh and opened her eyes. A slow smile lit her face. "Morning," she said, voice husky from sleep. "Morning," he replied, cranking the window down to let in fresh air. "Not the best hotel in the world, but at least we're still on schedule." Kim laughed, rubbing the back of her neck. "Better than I expected, actually. I sort of like waking up in a new place every day." Malik considered that for a second, remembering how routine had always grounded his life in Sweet Gum Meadows. He woke before dawn for his ranger duties, taught visitors about the local flora and fauna, then ended days beside Kim with a gentle sense of completion. Yet something in him welcomed this change of pace, too. Perhaps it reminded him of that quieter, freer life he once shared with his grandfather, where each morning promised a new lesson from nature. "You ready to get moving?" he asked, turning the key in the ignition. Kim fiddled with her phone for a moment. "Just a quick check on the weather for the next stretch. Don't want us driving into a storm." He nodded and pulled out of the parking spot, merging onto the highway with a cautious glance at the side mirror. As the SUV gained speed, Malik's mind wandered to New Hampshire. The rocky paths, the tall pines, the old cabin that had once been home. He wondered if the paint on the shutters had peeled away after all these years, if the creek still ran as strong behind the property. He pictured his grandfather, stoic yet ever patient, guiding him through the forest. The ache of missing him was as familiar as an old bruise. Kim's voice broke through his reverie. "So, let's talk first, big stop. We'll be hitting Shenandoah National Park tomorrow if we keep a decent pace today, right?" He fought back a smile. "That's the plan. I'd love to show you those ridgeline views. They're not quite as vast as up in New England, but they're beautiful in their own way." Her excitement was like a morning breeze, light and energizing. "I can't wait. I want to do a quick live video, maybe show my followers the mountains in real time." "Go for it," he replied, glancing her way. "I'm glad you're sharing your experience, though I've never been too comfortable on camera." She reached over, lightly tracing her fingertips across his forearm. "Malik, you'll be fine. People love your calm energy on your YouTube channel. Wait till they see you in your natural element." He huffed a little laugh, half flattered, half abashed. "If you say so. I just don't want to end up in some blooper reel." "Oh, you can count on that," Kim teased, and he shook his head in amused surrender. They fell into a contented silence after that, the road stretching onward beneath them. Every now and then, a glance out the window offered glimpses of farmland, old wooden barns, or rolling hills turned golden by the morning sun. Each sight pricked at his memory, like pieces of a puzzle he used to know. Images of the East Coast states that, in time, would lead him straight to the place he'd once called home. Kim leaned over to switch on the radio, and a bluesy tune trickled through the speakers. Malik relaxed his grip on the wheel. As they cruised north, mile after mile, he felt the weight of the unknown lessen just a bit. The notion that he might face his family soon still circled his thoughts, but with Kim's unwavering support, it no longer felt so intimidating. Besides, part of him yearned to stand by the porch of that cabin again, to breathe in New Hampshire's crisp air as though his grandfather were still there, guiding him. They spent much of the drive discussing small details: where to stop for lunch, potential campsites versus roadside motels, and whether they'd have enough time to detour for a quick visit to a local wildlife reserve. Occasionally, Kim tapped notes into her phone, planning out social media posts and brainstorming new hairstyle ideas she'd try at each scenic spot. By mid-morning, a sign for a small diner promised hot coffee and local eats, and Malik pulled off the highway with a decisive turn of the wheel. He parked under a towering oak, dappled sunlight painting the hood of the SUV. Kim stretched as she hopped out, her braids swaying in the mild breeze. The diner inside was cozy, with checkered curtains and the aroma of biscuits drifting from the kitchen. Malik felt a wave of nostalgia. Maybe it was the simple decor, so reminiscent of Rochelle's place. They took a booth near the window, sunlight illuminating the powdered sugar dusting on the table's centerpiece of glazed donuts. Kim smiled when she caught his eyes scanning the place. "Feels a little like home, huh?" Malik nodded. "Almost too much. I keep expecting to see Rochelle come out of the kitchen and tease us for not calling first." They laughed, and for a moment, the tension of the journey eased. It occurred to Malik that these small moments, stolen hours in roadside diners, marveling at farmland rolling by, stirring the pot of memory, were what made the trip special. Not just the final destination or the uncertain reunion ahead, but the shared adventure in the in-between. He met Kim's gaze over the table, her smile tinged with that familiar warmth he'd fallen in love with. "We've got a long road ahead," he said, his voice quiet with anticipation, "but it's good to be on it with you." She reached across to give his hand a gentle squeeze. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And in that diner, far from Sweet Gum Meadows but close to the heart of what they cherished, Malik felt a sense of calm and certainty. Whatever they faced, whatever awaited him in New Hampshire, Kim's presence made it all feel possible.
Chapter 5. Kim tapped her foot against the passenger side floor mat, still buzzing from the fresh coffee and buttery biscuits she and Malik had enjoyed at the roadside diner. The warmth lingered on her tongue, mingling with the crisp morning air drifting through the cracked window. She glanced over the map she'd been studying. The plan was to push on until mid-afternoon, then find a quick stop to freshen up properly. A look at Malik told her he was settled into a calm focus, hands steady on the wheel as the SUV hummed along the highway. She couldn't help but appreciate that easy confidence, a reminder of how comfortable he was in motion, whether patrolling a Georgia trail or navigating rural highways. "I'm thinking we take a short break at the next town," Kim suggested. "Get a motel room for a few hours to really stretch out and clean up. Then we can hit the road again before sundown." Malik nodded. "Sounds good to me. Better than dozing off in the car for another night." Her phone buzzed lightly in her lap. Another notification. Followers commenting on her latest braided hairstyle post. Kim smiled to herself. Even while on the move, she could feel her online presence thriving. Capturing pictures of her box braids in scenic settings was a fun way to stay connected, and her fans seemed to love it. But as much as she enjoyed sharing snapshots, she also needed time to recharge, ideally somewhere with hot running water and a proper bed. A half hour later, they caught sight of the big green sign, Greenfield Motel, vacancy. The building that came into view was modest, 2 stories with a neat row of doors, and tall trees framing the lot. It wasn't fancy, but it promised a welcome change from rest stop bathrooms. Malik steered into the parking lot, pulling up to the small office near a few scattered cars. "I'll check us in," he said, cutting the engine. While he disappeared into the office, Kim inhaled the pine-tinged air. A hiker shuffled past, backpack swaying, reminding her that soon they'd be in Shenandoah National Park, an even bigger playground for outdoor lovers. The thought spurred a tingle of anticipation. Malik returned with a small key in hand. "Room 12, he announced. "We can stay a bit, then get back on the road." They popped open the SUV's trunk to grab overnight bags. Kim swung hers over her shoulder, carefully adjusting her box braids as she did. The drive was fun, but hours in the car always left her craving a real break. The motel room was simple: blue comforters on 2 double beds, a worn dresser, and a small TV perched on an ancient stand. But it was clean, and the ensuite bathroom was exactly what she needed. She stepped inside, flipping on the light to find a modest vanity and enough space for a proper scrub. Malik, always thoughtful, said, "Go ahead. I'll tidy things up in the car and check the route for tomorrow." "Thanks," she replied, warmth filling her chest. After rummaging through her bag for a fresh outfit, Kim turned on the shower. She kept her box braids neatly secured with a large hairband and a shower cap. The warm water on her shoulders and back felt heavenly, easing tension she hadn't even noticed building up. She wouldn't need to do much else, just the relief of feeling human again. She mentally went through a short to-do list, reminding herself she wanted to film a snippet of their day's highlights for her social feed. Once done, she toweled off and swapped into fresh clothes, taking a moment to inspect her reflection. Her braids still looked neat, thanks to the protective cap. She straightened a few that had flipped out of place, then headed back into the main room, feeling refreshed from head to toe. Malik returned soon after, giving her a light smile as he gathered his own things. "Your turn," she teased, gesturing toward the bathroom door. He slipped inside with an amused nod. While waiting, Kim set up her phone on a small stand near the window, angling it so the natural light framed her and the plain motel decor in the background. She recorded a short video. "Hey everyone, checking in from the road. Just got a chance to freshen up at a little motel. Next stop, Shenandoah National Park, where I'll be showing off my favorite box braids among the mountain views. Stay tuned." She ended it with a grin, pleased at how easily the snippet uploaded on the motel's decent Wi-Fi. Malik emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, hair damp around his temples and a relaxed expression on his face. He claimed a quick seat at the edge of one bed, checking the time on his phone. "Couple hours drive left before we reach tonight's stop," he said, trailing a fingertip over the folded map. "We'll pass by some scenic byways we might want to explore." She nodded, gently patting her braids as she repacked her toiletry bag. "I'm all for taking in as many sights as we can, especially if it means capturing some breathtaking videos. Plus, I'm dying to get footage of your ranger knowledge in action." A hint of a smirk played on Malik's lips. "I'll try to impress, but I make no promises about being photogenic." Kim laughed. "You're more photogenic than you think." With that, they finished tidying up and locked the room, the sun still high enough to leave them hours on the road. Back at the SUV, Malik carefully stashed the maps in the glove compartment while Kim hauled her overnight bag to the trunk. The midday brightness spilled across the parking lot, revealing the tiny red flowers planted along the motel walkway. Climbing into the passenger seat, Kim felt lighter. It was amazing how a simple shower and a small break in a motel room could reset her spirit. She glanced at Malik, who started the engine with an easy hand. Their eyes met in a mutual, quiet understanding. These small moments of comfort were just as important as the grand adventures waiting at each national park. As they eased back onto the highway, Kim let her head rest against the seat, content in the knowledge that wherever the road led, they had each other, and plenty of pit stops to make it feel like home along the way.
Chapter 6. Malik guided the SUV onto a winding stretch of road with the radio turned down, letting the distant hum of the engine fill the space. Pockets of farmland unfurled in both directions, plump with green pastures and rambling fences. The scenery was so different from the dense Georgia trails he'd grown used to patrolling. It reminded him that every place had a story, and he was eager to learn a few more on this trip. He glanced over at Kim, who was tapping quickly on her phone, likely responding to comments on her latest post, considering how her online presence had been buzzing since she announced the road trip. He felt a quiet pride watching her brand grow, but also a keen awareness that this journey was more than a social media spectacle. They were headed into the heart of his past, a place he had fled after losing his grandfather, and the cabin that held all those memories. The SUV topped a gentle slope, and a roadside sign came into view. Scenic overlook, 1 mile. Malik felt an instant tug of curiosity. A quick glance at Kim confirmed the same spark in her eyes. "Think we should pull over?" she asked, lifting her gaze from the phone. "We're making good time." "Yeah," Malik replied, already flicking on his turn signal. "Might be nice to see what's out there." The overlook turned out to be a gravel lot, hugging the edge of a rolling countryside. Beyond the guardrail, a patchwork of fields and clusters of trees stretched beneath a wide sky. Malik parked, and together they stepped out, the breeze carrying a soft rustle through the grass. Leaning against the guardrail, Kim softly exhaled in wonder. "This is beautiful. It almost feels like a different version of Sweet Gum Meadows, just laid out on a bigger scale." Malik nodded, his thoughts drifting to the old farmland near his childhood cabin in New Hampshire. There was something about open space, be it farmland or forest, that reminded him of how small he was in the grand scheme of nature. "I never get tired of these views," he said quietly. "I guess that's part of why I love working outdoors. The landscape's always changing, but it's constant at the same time." Kim rested a hand on his arm, the warm pressure bringing him back to the present. "You look thoughtful," she murmured. He offered a slight shrug. "Just thinking about what comes next. Shenandoah, New Hampshire, my family." The last 2 words felt heavier than he intended, but Kim's understanding nod eased the sudden tightness in his chest. "You've got this," she said, voice quiet yet assured, "and I'm right here if things get tough." Before Malik could respond, Kim pulled her phone from her back pocket and flashed a grin. "I can't resist. I need a quick pic of these fields," she said. She snapped a few shots of the softly rolling hills, capturing the golden afternoon light, then turned the lens on him. "And one of you, Ranger man." Normally he'd groan at the idea, but her playfulness disarmed him. He gave a small, good-natured smile. "Anything for your feed," he teased. "Actually, that one's just for me," she returned, winking as she pocketed her phone again. Her expression grew tender. "I'll share it eventually, but some things deserve to stay personal for a bit." He felt warmth spread through his chest at that. Moments like these, light and honest, were reminders of why they were taking this journey in the first place. Not just to heal the past or promote their passions, but to weave more memories into the fabric they shared. Kim raised her phone again, finger hovering over the button. "Okay, now I really do need a short video for everyone following along." She recorded a brief clip, panning the fields and then capturing Malik leaning against the guardrail. He gave the camera a small wave, smiling at how easy it felt with her behind the lens. Once done, Kim tucked the phone away, turning to loop her arm through his. The farmland breeze ruffled her box braids, the soft hush like a calming backdrop. They stood together a moment longer, soaking in the view. Eventually, the demands of the road pulled them back. Malik squeezed Kim's hand, then led the way to the SUV, heart settling into a steady rhythm. The long drive ahead still carried the weight of unresolved family ties, but with each stop, he felt more grounded. They had miles to go, countless vistas to discover, but for now it was enough to simply breathe in the open air, share a quiet laugh, and keep moving forward side by side.
Chapter 7. Kim tilted her head back against the SUV's passenger seat as they wound through the last miles before Shenandoah National Park. Ridges had begun to rise in the distance, their gentle slopes painted in greens and browns. It was an entirely different world from the farmland they just left behind, but just as captivating. She caught herself smiling. This was exactly why she wanted to travel. To feel that subtle shift in the landscape, to sense the promise of new experiences with every turn. She caught a glance at Malik. His eyes were fixed on the road, yet his posture held a slight ease she recognized as excitement, an almost imperceptible anticipation in his shoulders. This was his element, after all. She recalled how he often said nature never failed to give him perspective. Back in Georgia, he'd quietly thrived among the trails, guiding visitors through forests and along rivers. Now, on a new path in this unfamiliar region, He seemed just as ready to soak it all in. "Looks like we'll make good time," she said softly. Malik nodded, a trace of a smile forming. "Yeah, if we keep up this pace, we'll reach the park entrance with a couple hours of daylight left." Kim felt a jolt of excitement. Daylight would mean a chance to take a quick hike, or at least find a scenic spot to record some footage for Malik's YouTube channel, and maybe snap a few pictures of her box braids in the golden evening glow. The idea of it all, the possibility of shaping fresh memories out here, gave her a small rush of energy. A sign announced a tiny town a few miles ahead, promising gas and general supplies. It sounded like just what they needed, an opportunity to fill the tank and gather last-minute provisions. She motioned to the sign. "Should we stop? Might be our best bet before we enter park territory." "Good call," Malik said, putting on the turn signal. Within minutes, they were rolling up to a quaint gas station that sat at the edge of an old-fashioned main street. A handful of dusty pickups lined the lot, and across the road, a small general store boasted everything from camping gear to homemade jams. "Perfect," Kim murmured as Malik parked next to the pump. They hopped out, and she took in the gentle quiet of the place. No horns blaring, no neon glare, just the creak of old wood and the hush of a light breeze. While Malik set the pump, Kim stretched, shaking out her legs from the long drive. The fresh air revived her in an instant. "Go on inside," Malik said. "Grab whatever you need. I'll handle the tank." She gave him a grateful nod and crossed toward the store. Its weathered sign read Fletcher's General, the paint peeling around the edges. Stepping inside, she found an eclectic mix of practical goods: lanterns, canned food, cheap souvenirs, and a cooler with local cheeses. The smell of coffee and pine-scented candles rolled together in a comforting swirl. A friendly older woman stood behind the counter, crocheting something as she watched the door. "Howdy," she greeted with a warm half-smile. "Haven't seen you before." Kim returned the smile. "We're just passing through, heading to Shenandoah for a bit of exploring." "Ah, visitors," the woman said, setting aside her crochet. "That park's real pretty. Best place to see the sunset if you ask me." She gestured broadly toward a rack of maps and brochures. "We keep a few pamphlets for travelers if you're interested." "Thank you," Kim replied, making her way over to the rack. She scanned the info, eventually picking up a map that highlighted hiking trails. Even if they only had time for one short walk today, she wanted to choose wisely. She meandered through the aisles, picking up granola bars, bottled water, and a small container of dried fruit. Then, on a whim, she snatched a local berry jam from a display. Maybe they could use it for breakfast tomorrow. She also spotted a cute little enamel mug with a black bear silhouette on it. Couldn't hurt to have a souvenir, she thought, tucking it under her arm. Malik soon strolled in, a faint gasoline smell clinging to his shirt. He cast a quick look around, lips curving at the cozy vibe. "Everything good in here?" She held up the map. "Got some trail details," she said brightly, then dangled the jam jar with a grin. "Figured it might be nice to have a taste of local flavor." He nodded, eyes still roaming the shelves. "I'll grab a couple more water bottles, maybe some first aid essentials. Then we're set." Within minutes, they were at the counter, exchanging small talk with the cashier about park conditions. The older woman mentioned that the weather might shift in a day or two, some mild rain in the forecast. Kim mentally noted that. Rainy footage could be tricky, but she also knew Malik wouldn't let a little drizzle keep him from exploring. Outside, they loaded their supplies into the SUV and slid back into their seats. Kim fiddled with the new map, scanning the routes near the park entrance. "There's this overlook loop. Looks like about a mile round trip," she said, showing Malik. "We could probably manage that before dark." A thoughtful crease formed between his brows. "Let's do it," he agreed after a moment. "A short hike to get our legs moving. We've been cooped up in the car all day." Kim couldn't help the wave of excitement that coursed through her. The day had been long, full of highways and stops, but now it was about to open into that sense of freedom she always associated with nature. She could practically taste the cool mountain air. They drove the last miles quietly, the SUV ascending gentle curves as the road gained elevation. At the official park entrance, Kim felt a flutter of nerves and anticipation, like they'd arrived at the threshold of something vast and welcoming. The ranger at the booth was friendly, offering them a brochure and a cheerful wave. Sunlight still draped the mountains in soft gold when they parked at the small trailhead. Only a handful of other cars lingered. Most people had probably come earlier in the day. Kim hopped out, adjusting her box braids from where they'd bunched against the seat. She inhaled sharply. The air had a crisp edge and carried the scent of wild grass and distant pine. "This is amazing," she breathed. Malik looked around, a subtle glow in his eyes. "I've missed this feeling," he admitted. "Something about higher elevations makes everything seem clearer." Side by side, they started up the trail. The earth beneath their shoes was slightly damp, but firm enough. Dappled sunlight pierced the canopy overhead, speckling the ground. Kim trailed her fingers along the trunk of a mossy tree, marveling at the small, spongy texture. Maybe she'd snap a photo later, capturing the little details that often went unnoticed. They walked mostly in silence, each quietly soaking in the environment. Occasionally, Kim paused to take short video clips for her social feed. Footage of Malik forging ahead on the path or the swirl of light across the leaves. He smiled gently, not minding her occasional stops. It seemed they were both eager to bottle these moments. When the trail curved around a rocky bend, they emerged onto a clearing that overlooked a valley. A hush fell between them. Far below, patches of farmland and forest merged seamlessly, the horizon meeting a pale sky tinted with the first hints of sunset's pinks and oranges. Kim's breath caught at the sheer beauty spread out before them. "Wow," she managed, stepping closer to the edge where a wooden railing stood as a safeguard. Malik joined her, resting his forearms on the railing. A breeze fluttered past, stirring the edges of his shirt and lightly brushing Kim's braids across her shoulder. They stayed that way for a long moment, quietly sharing the view, as if words might break the tranquil spell. Eventually, Kim pulled out her phone. She framed a shot of the valley and the sky's shifting hues. "I'm not sure pictures can do it justice," she whispered, pressing the shutter anyway. He glanced over, his voice equally low. "It'll remind us how it felt," he said simply. She took in his profile against the softly glowing backdrop. She couldn't help smiling. This was just the beginning, a single stop on a journey that would lead them through countless other breathtaking places, each with its own story. And somewhere along the way, they'd reached New Hampshire, where unresolved family chapters awaited Malik. For now, though, this simple scene of mountain and sky was enough. The sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, coloring the clouds in apricot and rose. Kim snapped one last picture for good measure, then tucked her phone away. Slipping her hand into Malik's, she squeezed it gently. No matter what challenges lay ahead, moments like these offered a comforting certainty. They were forging a path together, step by step, breath by breath, ready to greet whatever tomorrow brought.
Chapter 8. Malik stood at the edge of the overlook a while longer, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The rolling valleys had turned to silhouettes under a wash of pale orange sky. It reminded him of the long, slow sunsets in New Hampshire, when he and his grandfather would pause chores to stand on the cabin's porch and watch the dusk settle. A twinge of nostalgia tugged at him, but this time he wasn't alone. He glanced at Kim, who was fiddling with her phone's camera. Even in the half-light, he could see her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and peace. The Shenandoah breeze ruffled the tips of her box braids, carrying the gentle scent of wild grass and pine. "All set?" he asked softly. Kim nodded, though she lingered, taking one last long look. "I think so," she replied, slipping the phone into her pocket. "I'd stay all night if it wasn't for the chill in the air." Malik breathed in the cool wind that hinted at a dropping temperature. "We can head back to the SUV, then figure out where to camp or find a lodge. It's getting dark fast." As they retraced their steps along the winding trail, the overhead canopy grew shadowy. Malik guided her with a soft caution. He knew that once the sun was gone, navigating unfamiliar paths could be tricky. But it was just a short walk back, and soon they emerged at the quiet parking area. After stowing their gear in the back seat, Malik leaned against the SUV's door for a moment. He felt pleasantly tired from the hike, with that familiar ache in his calves that spoke of a day well spent. "Any preference for tonight? Campsite or a park lodge?" he asked, meeting Kim's gaze. Kim sighed in mock indecision, then grinned. A campsite might be fun, but a lodge has hot water and a comfy bed. Normally I'd say no big deal, but I'd like a decent night's rest." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Let's see which is closest." He grabbed a folded brochure from the console, scanning the map of accommodations they'd picked up at the park entrance. A small lodge a few miles down the road looked promising. They climbed into the SUV and set off, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Around them, tall silhouettes of trees lined the road, moonlight beginning to shimmer at the treetops. Malik let the hum of the engine fall into the background, content in the quiet. It had been a good day, simple moments on a trail and that breathtaking view from the overlook. His thoughts drifted to New Hampshire again, unbidden. The distance between them and his grandfather's old cabin shrank with each new day on the road. Malik felt the tension in his chest tighten just slightly, as though reuniting with that part of his life was both a relief and a challenge. For years, he'd believed leaving that cabin behind meant leaving behind loneliness, too. But now, he wondered if facing his distant relatives might finally heal some of the hurt. He glanced over at Kim, who scrolled through her phone's camera roll, smiling at the pictures she'd captured. He found it comforting how she always seemed to sense when he needed space for his thoughts. She never pushed, never hurried him. He wondered if she realized how that quiet understanding anchored him. "Thinking about your grandfather?" she asked softly, almost as if reading his mind. "Yeah," he admitted, exhaling slowly. "I can't believe I'm heading back. In a sense, anyway, not to his cabin exactly, but to what's left of that life." He paused, drumming his fingers on the wheel. "Sometimes I just don't know what to expect from those relatives. We've barely spoken." Kim set her phone aside. "I get it," she said gently. "But you'll have me, and you'll also have whatever peace you can find by trying. That's the important part, right?" He took a moment to let her words settle, then nodded. "Yeah, it's time. I just hope things go smoother than I'm imagining." She reached across the console, resting a hand on his forearm. "We'll handle it together." Her quiet reassurance settled in his chest, easing some of the uncertainty. By then, the lodge sign appeared on their right, a rustic wooden marker illuminated by a single lantern. Malik steered into the gravel driveway. In the headlights, the lodge's wooden facade came into view, warm light glowing in the windows. "Looks cozy," Kim observed, sounding relieved. He parked near the entrance, and they headed inside. The check-in desk occupied a small lobby filled with the aroma of wood polish and a faint trace of something sweet. Apple cider, maybe. A friendly clerk welcomed them, handing over a brass key. A few minutes later, they reached a modest room with wooden accents and a wide window overlooking the tree line. Malik flipped on a small lamp, letting a soft glow spill across the bed and the snug sitting area. Outside, the night had fully settled, stars peeking through the branches. Kim moved around the space, taking it in with a thoughtful smile. Definitely cozier than sleeping in the car. He set down their overnight bag. "I'll say." Then, with a hint of humor, "Not that I mind roughing it now and then, but a warm bed is nice." They began their usual small routine, Malik rummaging for maps and planning the next day's route, Kim scrolling through her phone and occasionally showing him a snapshot that made her laugh. A calm settled over them, the sense of being safe and nestled away from the open road for a while. When everything was in order, Malik sank onto the edge of the bed, flicking his gaze to the window. The sky was clear and dark, an endless canvas for the stars. He felt that old, quiet awe from childhood stirring in his chest, back when he'd stand outside the cabin with his grandfather, counting constellations. Kim joined him, lacing her fingers through his. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he relished the familiar warmth of the gesture. "Want to take a quick walk outside?" she asked, a spark in her eyes. "Stargazing might be fun." He squeezed her hand. "Yeah, let's do it." They slipped back into their jackets and stepped onto the lodge's small veranda. Beyond it lay a wide lawn bordered by tall pines, the sky above scattered with brilliant points of light. In the hush, they could hear leaves rustling and every so often a soft nighttime call of a bird or distant wildlife. Malik and Kim strolled across the grass, eventually finding a wooden bench near the tree line. They sat close together, heads tilted to the sky, gazing up at countless stars. The hush between them felt sacred, as though the quiet wonder needed no words. Malik felt the subtle brush of Kim's shoulder against his. He realized that, while the road ahead might be filled with uncertainties, family he wasn't sure would welcome him, the weight of memories at that cabin, here and now he had everything he needed: the calm of nature, a sense of purpose, and someone who believed in him. He reached for Kim's hand again, gently. She responded with a small squeeze. In that shared silence, with the nighttime forest breathing softly around them, Malik allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to look at these very stars from his grandfather's porch, Kim by his side. Perhaps that was the only kind of closure he truly needed: to stand in that old place, not alone this time, but hand in hand with the person who made every step forward worth taking. For the moment, under the watchful sky, he let those thoughts carry him, and he breathed out the last of his lingering doubts into the crisp, starlit air.
Chapter 9. Kim stirred awake at dawn, drawn from a dreamless sleep by pale light creeping in around the lodge's curtains. She gave a slow stretch in the plush bed, reminded of how good it felt to rest somewhere warm and inviting after countless hours on the road. The night before had ended with an impromptu stargazing session, one of those moments that felt both exhilarating and comforting all at once. A soft rustle from the other side of the room made her look over. Malik stood by the window, gazing out at the early morning sky. He seemed lost in thought, posture relaxed. She couldn't help but marvel at how different he looked from the quiet ranger she'd first met in Sweet Gum Meadows, a man who had, at one time, walled himself off from letting people in. Now, he embraced new experiences in a way that reminded her of just how far they both had come. Kim pushed aside the covers and padded over to join him. The sunrise colored the horizon in gentle pastels, while the outlines of trees formed dark silhouettes. "Good morning," she said softly. Malik turned, his eyes brightening with a smile. "Morning. Didn't mean to wake you." She lightly shook her head. "I like waking up to something like this." She glanced at the scene beyond the glass pane. "Is it as pretty as the sunrises back in Georgia?" He considered the pink-streaked sky. Different, but just as beautiful. There's something about being at a higher elevation, makes the colors sharper. Kim pressed her palm to the cool glass. "Part of me wants to rush outside and record it, but another part wants to keep it just for us," she admitted, voice low. Lately, she found herself cherishing those private snippets of time when everything felt personal, not broadcast for an audience. Malik smiled gently. "We can do both. You'll have plenty more sunrises to capture on this trip." Nodding, she turned and flicked on the bedside lamp, rummaging for her phone. "Let me just get a quick snapshot. I can't resist." She snapped a photo through the window, capturing the subtle purples and oranges in the sky, then set her phone aside again. "Done. Now we have proof for ourselves, at least," she teased, lightening the mood. A few minutes later, they dressed in comfortable hiking clothes, deciding to explore a nearby trail as the day broke. The lodge offered complimentary coffee in the lobby, so Kim grabbed 2 steaming cups while Malik shouldered a day pack with water and snacks. Outside, the crisp morning air greeted them. Kim tugged her jacket closer and inhaled, savoring the earthy scent of dew on the grass. She had grown up surrounded by warmth and humidity in Georgia, so this cooler mountain climate felt invigorating. The sun was just peeking over the ridges, painting everything in a soft, golden wash. They followed a short path leading behind the lodge. According to the clerk at the front desk, the trail meandered for about a mile, eventually opening into a small clearing, perfect for a gentle morning walk before they continued on their journey. Kim let Malik take the lead, admiring how naturally he navigated even an unfamiliar place. The trail dipped among slender trees, trunks speckled with lichen in pale greens and whites. Birds flitted between branches overhead, their songs echoing in the quiet. Kim felt her chest swell with a mix of gratitude and wonder. "Reminds me of home," Malik commented at one point, pausing to run a hand along the trunk of a tall pine. "The bark's a bit different, less resin, but the vibe is close." She offered a tender smile, recognizing the hint of longing in his voice. "We'll be there soon," she reminded him. The words carried weight. She knew that returning to New Hampshire with her by his side meant confronting pieces of himself he'd tucked away for a long time. He nodded, exhaling. Yeah, soon. I'm not sure I'm ready, but I guess I'd rather get it over with than let it loom forever. Kim squeezed his hand lightly. You don't have to rush once we get there, you know. We'll take it day by day. She meant every word. The last thing she wanted was for him to feel cornered or anxious about reconnecting with family, especially if it turned out they weren't keen on smoothing over old wounds. They walked in companionable silence until the trail gently curved into a small clearing as promised. Sunlight streamed through the opening in the canopy, turning the grass a vibrant green. A couple of granite boulders clustered at one edge, natural benches for anyone wanting to sit. Kim lowered herself onto one, taking a moment to absorb the scene. She wondered how many times local lodge guests had done exactly this, marveling at the same gentle morning light. Malik joined her, setting the day pack down. His gaze swept the clearing, alert in that ranger-like way of his, as though mentally cataloging the terrain and wildlife. Then he slipped an arm around Kim's waist, drawing her closer. She felt the steady thrum of his heart under her palm. I'm really glad you're here, you know, he murmured, voice quiet under the birdsong overhead. She tilted her face toward him. So am I, she said simply. Wherever you go, I'll be there. Count on it. His lips curved into a soft smile that reached his eyes. They remained that way for a few moments, letting the morning sounds fill in the gaps where words felt unnecessary. In the distance, the gurgle of a small stream hinted at more of nature's secrets waiting if they continued down the path. But for now, Kim found herself content in the simple togetherness of it all. Eventually, they decided it was time to head back, mindful of the miles they still needed to log that day. By the time they returned to the lodge, the sun was fully up and the soft hustle of other guests had begun. Doors opening, cars starting, voices floating on the breeze. Kim felt a small pang of reluctance to leave the gentle bubble of Shenandoah behind, but fresh excitement bubbled up when she remembered there were so many more places to see. After a quick breakfast from the lodge's modest spread, muffins, fruit, and more strong coffee, they checked out and packed the SUV. As Malik took the driver's seat, Kim fiddled with her phone once more, uploading a short clip from their morning walk. She kept the best parts unrecorded, stored instead in her memory. The lodge parking lot emptied behind them as the SUV rolled onto the main road again. Daylight stretched out before them, a reminder of all that remained to discover. Kim felt that familiar flutter of anticipation in her chest. Another day on the road, another chance to see the world through nature's lens, and to stand beside Malik while he sought pieces of his past. Outside the window, Shenandoah's ridges fell away slowly. Soon enough, they'd be crossing state lines, pushing north. Kim glanced at Malik's calm profile. That same quiet determination she loved so much flickered in his eyes. He was bracing himself, maybe, for the emotional journey ahead. But she knew he also carried a spark of eagerness, because for all the uncertainty, this was a homecoming of sorts. Resting her hand on his, Kim found her heart filling with warmth. She was ready to face the winding roads, the family tension, the unstoppable force of time and memory. Wherever this path led them, they would step onto it together, forging a new story in the footprints of the old.
Chapter 10. They left Shenandoah behind them under a sky brushed with wispy morning clouds. Malik guided the SUV along a winding route that cut through patches of farmland and sleepy towns. Each new mile felt both exhilarating and peaceful, an odd combination that mirrored Malik's own state of mind. He was eager to keep moving, to face whatever awaited him in New Hampshire, and yet a twinge of unease lingered in his chest. Questions about family, about the old cabin, kept flickering in his thoughts. He glanced over at Kim. She was lost in her phone, probably checking messages or scanning social media. Now and then, she gasped softly at a comment or giggled at some joke buried in her feeds. He found it comforting. Her presence grounded him. It reminded him that he wouldn't be walking into his family's world alone. After a time, she tucked her phone away, gaze turning outward to the passing scenery. "It's so green here," she murmured. Didn't realize how the landscapes would keep shifting state by state. Malik nodded, slowing for a curve. "That's part of what I love about traveling by car. You see the whole transition, not just the endpoints." They made loose plans for the day, another 4 or 5 hours on the road, then a break for lunch. If they found a scenic detour, they'd explore it. Otherwise, they'd push on. By evening, they hoped to land near the edges of Pennsylvania, inching ever closer to New England territory. Before long, a tiny roadside store advertising local produce caught Kim's eye. "Want to check it out?" she asked, already reaching for her phone to note their location. "Could be a fun break." Malik didn't hesitate. "Sure, looks like a family-run place." He pulled off onto a gravel shoulder, the SUV's tires crunching softly as they parked beside a humble wooden sign that read Applewood Farm Stand. A modest barn sat behind a few tables, displaying fresh fruit, and from the looks of it, jars of homemade preserves. Stepping out, he stretched his arms overhead, welcoming the new day's air. Kim hopped down, braids swishing, curiosity lighting her face. Together, they strolled up to the tables where an older gentleman in suspenders carefully arranged baskets of apples. "Morning," the man greeted, voice friendly with a subtle drawl. "Y'all passing through?" Malik nodded. "Heading north. Thought we'd stop for some fresh fruit." "Well, you've come to the right place. We picked these apples ourselves, some of the best in the region." He handed Kim an apple with a proud smile. "Here, try one." Kim took a bite, eyes widening in delight. "That's really good," she said around a mouthful. Then, turning to Malik, she held it out for him to taste. He leaned in for a small bite, and sure enough, sweetness burst over his tongue. "That's delicious." The man introduced himself as Henry Fletcher and offered them a tour of the small orchard behind the barn. It wasn't large, but neatly kept rows of apple trees stretched out under the gentle sun. As they wandered, Henry chatted amiably about harvest schedules, how weather patterns had changed in recent years, and the joys of running a family farm. Malik listened, intrigued. There was something honest about a life spent tending land day in and day out, reminding him of how he and his grandfather once lived off the forest's provisions, though in a much wilder sense. Near the orchard's edge, a wooden bench overlooked a little pond, its waters catching the morning light. Malik paused there, taking in the scene. He realized that though each place they stopped was different, a farmhouse, a roadside diner, or a national park, they all shared a quiet sense of belonging. For a moment, he let his mind drift to New Hampshire again, imagining that same hush around the old cabin's porch. Kim sidled up next to him, bag of apples swinging in her hand. "Pretty, isn't it?" she asked, glancing at the sunlight glimmering on the water. "It is," Malik replied softly. He shifted so he could look at her fully. Never expected to find so many little gems just driving around. Henry eventually bid them farewell with a wave and a discount on the apples for the road. Malik and Kim thanked him, returned to the SUV, and resumed their trek north. With the bag of apples nestled between them on the center console, they shared the fruit as they rolled along, their conversation easy and unhurried. "People keep surprising me," Kim said at one point, finishing off an apple. "They're so open and welcoming, even to strangers passing through." "That's a good reminder," Malik mused, gaze flicking between the road and her profile. "Sometimes I worry about how my relatives will react when I show up. But I guess some folks can be more understanding than I expect." Kim placed a hand on his arm. "True. Doesn't guarantee anything, but it's a good sign. You've got me in your corner, too." He gave her a quiet nod, grateful for her calm assurance. As the miles stretched ahead, he felt the usual swirl of nerves about what awaited in New Hampshire, but he also felt an anchor of hope in his chest. Small kindnesses, a friendly orchard owner, a cozy lodge, the shared wonder of an early morning trail, formed a gentle reminder that not every meeting was bound to be fraught with tension. Noon approached, and they spotted a rustic cafe perched on a slight rise overlooking a green valley. With mutual grins, they decided to stop for lunch. The cafe turned out to be a converted farmhouse with a whitewashed porch and wide windows streaming in daylight. Inside, they found a few tables occupied by couples chatting softly or sipping coffee with battered paperback novels propped beside them. Malik steered Kim toward a corner table near the window, inhaling the aroma of grilled sandwiches and fresh pastries. After placing their orders, they settled in, letting the lull of midday chatter wash over them. While waiting for their food, Kim took out her phone to answer a few messages. Malik watched her tap out replies, occasionally lighting up at something she read. He admired her dedication, not just to her craft, but to fostering real connections online. She was building a community, and somehow he was part of that in a small way. Their sandwiches arrived, his piled with roasted vegetables, hers brimming with tangy cheese and fresh tomato. They shared bites, passing plates back and forth as the midday sun climbed higher, bathing the cafe in a soft glow. "So," Kim ventured, setting down her napkin, "have you heard anything yet from your distant relatives? Any responses to the messages you sent?" Malik's shoulders tensed slightly. He'd indeed tried to reach out, sending a brief email to an address he'd found online, a cousin's name, or so he believed. "Not yet," he admitted. "But it might take time. They might not check that account often, if it's even theirs." Kim gave him a sympathetic smile. "Well, we'll keep going, see if we learn more along the way. Worst case, we show up politely, hats in hand." He breathed a small chuckle. "Politely, yes. Hopefully we won't scare them off." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics after that. Kim's ideas for her next post, Malik's plan to film a short video about local wildlife. By the time they finished lunch, the cafe had begun to fill with the afternoon crowd, and they took it as their cue to get back on the road. Climbing into the SUV, Malik rolled down the windows, letting a breeze sweep through. The orchard apples sat on the console, a testament to the small kindness they'd encountered that day. He guided them onto the highway once more, the vehicle's rumble forming a familiar background music to his thoughts. As they pressed onward, each passing mile felt like another subtle nudge toward the future and toward the unknown. Yet every stop along the way had shown Malik that unknowns weren't necessarily something to fear. They could hold unexpected generosity, warm conversations, and memorable moments. He reminded himself of that, letting the steady presence of Kim beside him soothe the churn of uncertainty in his gut. The road stretched out, beckoning them forward, and with each turn, Malik felt just a little more ready for whatever awaited him at the end of this path.
Chapter 11. Late afternoon sunlight cast a golden hue through the SUV windows as Kim scrolled through a handful of pictures she'd taken throughout the day. Apples at the orchard, a snapshot of Malik smiling at the cafe table, a hazy shot of farmland rolling by. Each one reminded her just how far they'd come in a short time. She leaned her head against the seat rest, feeling a pleasant warmth in her chest at the thought. Malik guided them toward Pennsylvania now, the map on his phone hinting at an upcoming scenic route that would bring them closer to their next overnight stop. So far, the entire trip had felt like a slow reveal. Every bend in the road, every quirky roadside stand, a chance for a new memory. She could tell from Malik's calm demeanor that the day's gentle pace helped settle some of his lingering worries about family. With each small kindness and friendly face they encountered, those anxieties seemed to recede just a bit. "We're coming up on the state line soon," Malik announced. "After that, it's maybe an hour to the next town with some lodging." "Sounds good," Kim replied. "Let's see what this scenic route has to offer." Her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced down, spotting a comment on a recent video she'd posted, her quick montage of morning light filtering through the Shenandoah trees. Viewers were loving it, leaving heart emojis and remarks about how they wanted to experience something similar in their own lives. She tapped out a grateful reply, then set her phone aside to watch the rolling landscape. The highway gave way to a narrower byway as they edged closer to Pennsylvania. The farmland grew sparser, replaced by gentle hills that rose to greet them. The sign proclaiming "Welcome to Pennsylvania" caught Kim's eye, and she snapped a quick shot through the windshield, grinning at the little milestone. Malik flashed a small smile when he noticed. Before long, they found themselves on a winding road lined with thick clusters of trees, their leaves just beginning to show the faintest shift in color. Kim inhaled and caught a hint of pine mingling with the late summer air. She couldn't help but recall how, just days ago, she'd been at Rochelle's diner, giving tearful farewells. Now the world felt vast and open, each new state weaving itself into their shared story. Eventually, the winding route delivered them into a modest town nestled among gentle hills. A sign reading Dawson's Ridge loomed near the road, pointing toward a small main street. It wasn't large, maybe a row of shops, a diner, and a gas station. The perfect place to rest for the evening. Malik slowed the SUV to a crawl. Looks like a good spot to call it a day, he said, scanning the buildings. I see a motel sign down there. Kim followed his gaze. Indeed, a little neon sign blinked vacancy in one window of a low building with a teal roof. Let's do it, she agreed. I'm not sure my back can take another 5 hours of driving. They pulled into a quiet lot just as the sun slipped behind a distant ridge. After checking in at the small front desk, they found themselves in a neatly kept room. 2 double beds draped in a colorful quilted pattern, a simple dresser with a mirror, and a window that overlooked a row of willows by a slow creek. It was cozy in that familiar, small-town way. Kim dropped her overnight bag onto one of the beds, then let out a soft sigh of relief. Every motel starts to blend together a bit, huh? Malik managed a tired but good-humored laugh. Yeah, but at least it's clean. Beats the old nights of dozing in the car. She shot him a quick grin, recalling a certain rest stop evening earlier in the trip. They'd done what they had to, but it was nice to settle in somewhere with a proper bed. A glance outside showed the final streaks of daylight stretching pink across the sky. We still have some time before it's fully dark, she noted. Think we can go for a little walk around this place? Might feel good to stretch our legs. I'm game, Malik said, rummaging in his bag for a light jacket. Let's check out that creek we passed. They left the motel, strolling down a gentle slope behind the building where a narrow walking path meandered beside a slow-moving creek. The water reflected the sky's soft colors, and a gentle hush settled over the area. Now and then, an evening bird call echoed from the trees. Kim felt something inside her loosen. Maybe it was the relief of not being behind a wheel or scanning a map for once. I like it here, she said quietly. The quiet towns we've passed through, the orchard back there, even that little cafe with the orchard apples earlier, makes me wonder how many hidden gems we'd find if we just wandered around more. Malik nodded, gaze following the creek's lazy current. That's always been my favorite part of traveling. Finding the unplanned places. You know, the ones you don't see on big travel brochures. Kim slipped her arm through his, her braided hair shifting lightly with the motion. In the fading light, she saw a softness in his expression, as though he was tucking away each of these moments for safekeeping. She was too. They paused at a small footbridge that arched over the creek, letting the hush of twilight settle around them. From somewhere down the path, the distant hum of a car starting up or a door slamming reminded them that life went on here, albeit slowly. Are you nervous? She asked gently, not specifying the subject, but knowing he'd understand she meant his relatives, his family, the cabin. He took a moment, the last rays of sun capturing the thoughtful furrow of his brow. A bit, he admitted, but less so than when we started. Meeting so many good-hearted people along the way, I guess it's reminded me that not every reunion has to be fraught with tension. Maybe they'll be open to talking, or maybe not. Either way, I feel readier to face it. Kim gave his arm a light squeeze. I'm proud of you, she said simply. She let the statement stand, no extra words needed. They watched the water for a while, the evening star flickering into view overhead. When the last of the daylight melted into a faint, dusky glow, they headed back to the motel. A single street lamp illuminated the parking lot, and a cluster of moths fluttered around its dull halo. What do you say to a quick dinner at that little diner we passed on the way in? Kim suggested. Malik's stomach growled in response, making them both laugh. Works for me, he said. The diner turned out to be a charming spot called Willow's End, with a handful of local families occupying the booths. Aromas of fried chicken and buttery rolls welcomed them. They slid into a corner booth and scanned the menu, each picking a hearty dinner plate. Over clinking silverware and warm lighting, they swapped impressions of the day's travels. Apples, old barns, the orchard caretaker named Henry, the scenic route and farmland. I might have enough footage to make a short compilation video, Kim mused, tapping notes into her phone. Mix it with some music, maybe do a voiceover about the kindness of strangers. I think people would like that. Malik nodded. Sounds good. I can do a short nature spotlight. Explain a bit about farmland ecology or something like that, if you want to cross-promote. Her eyes lit up. That's perfect. Our channels can complement each other. People can see me talk about daily life and braids and your ranger perspective, too. The waitress brought over 2 plates piled with comforting fare, barbecue chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed veggies for Kim, while Malik opted for a savory meatloaf special. They ate, making appreciative noises at each bite. The day's miles finally caught up to them, and soon they found themselves contentedly clearing their plates. Walking back to the motel in the soft glow of overhead lamps, Kim thought about how every small step felt like a brushstroke on a painting, one that would eventually lead them to the grand scene of Malik's childhood cabin in New Hampshire. Maybe it wouldn't be a peaceful reunion, but it was bound to be one they'd face with open hearts. In their room, she flicked on a bedside lamp while Malik checked the time. "We did good today," he said, voice hushed in the stillness. Kim eased onto the edge of the bed, pulling off her shoes. "We sure did," she murmured. And as she settled under the covers, she felt that same lull of calm she'd savored every night on this trip, a sense of promise humming through the quiet. Yes, they'd keep going. Yes, there would be challenges. But in every moment of rest, they found fresh strength for the next sunrise. Outside, the night wrapped Dawson's Ridge in a gentle cloak. Tomorrow they'd press on, crossing more highways and forging more memories, 1 mile at a time.
Chapter 12. The first pale light of dawn crept through the thin motel curtains, stirring Malik from sleep. He lay still for a moment, taking in the hush of the morning. Soft breathing from the other bed told him Kim was still dozing, likely enjoying the last scraps of rest before another long drive. Despite the miles ahead and the unresolved family visit waiting in New Hampshire, he felt an undercurrent of calm, fueled by the gentle pace they'd kept and the small-town kindness they'd encountered along the way. Slipping out of bed, he padded quietly to the window and drew the curtains aside. Outside, Dawson's Ridge was just waking. A few lights twinkled across the street, and a faint amber glow outlined the distant hills. It reminded him of early mornings back in Sweet Gum Meadows when he'd rise before dawn for a ranger shift. Only now the setting was different. Each step pulling him closer to his past. He heard Kim stir behind him. Turning, he caught her sleepy smile, half hidden by the covers. "You're up early," she mumbled. "Could have stayed in bed a little longer." Malik shrugged gently, voice low to keep the atmosphere unhurried. "Just wanted to see the sunrise. You know me. I like mornings." Kim eased upright, rubbing her eyes. "I'm not complaining. Sunrise means good light if I want to snap a pic," she teased, though her tone carried genuine fondness. "Let me get dressed and we can see what Dawson's Ridge has to offer for breakfast." Within half an hour, they'd both freshened up and packed their bags, ready to check out. The motel lobby offered coffee in foam cups and a jar of homemade pastries labeled Compliments of Miss Ethel. Malik poured himself a cup of the hot, slightly bitter brew, relishing the warmth against his palms. He passed a cup to Kim, who accepted it with a grateful sigh. They headed outside to load their things into the SUV. Dawn had broken fully by then, gilding the parking lot in a peachy glow. Malik took a moment to breathe in the crisp air, the swirl of coffee aroma mixing with dew-laced grass. "Any idea what's next on the route?" Kim asked, sliding her phone from her back pocket. Malik pulled the map app up on his own device. "We'll cross another stretch of Pennsylvania, maybe dip into New York before evening. If we see something interesting, we can stop. Otherwise, we just keep inching north." "Sounds perfect," she replied with a small grin, reaching up to adjust her box braids. "Let's see what hidden gems we stumble on today." Once settled in the SUV, Malik started the engine, and they rolled out of Dawson's Ridge. The roads were quiet this early, a few local pickup trucks and sedans all that passed by. The farmland soon gave way to rolling highways lined with more trees, the leaves showing the slightest signs of autumn creeping in. After an hour or so of driving, they spotted an exit for a modest diner perched near the highway, smoke curling from a tall metal chimney. Kim perked up. "Want to grab a real breakfast?" Malik nodded, stomach rumbling softly at the thought of something heartier than pastries. "Yes, please." The diner, a compact building with wide windows and a bright red door, had a hand-painted sign reading Carol's Kitchen. A small gravel lot out front held a couple of cars and a delivery truck. Stepping inside, Malik was immediately greeted by the smell of frying bacon and warm syrup. A single waitress bustled between tables, balancing plates of scrambled eggs, hash browns, and tall stacks of pancakes. They chose a booth beside a window overlooking a patch of grass turned golden by the morning sun. As they waited for menus, Kim placed her phone on the table. "I've been thinking," she began. "Once we reach New England, maybe we can carve out a day or two for me to film some hair tutorials outdoors. I know we'll be dealing with your family situation, but—" Malik reached for her hand, giving it a light squeeze. "I get it. Your social media is important, and it's part of this trip too. I'm good with that." He paused, contemplating the next words. "In some weird way, it might help me keep calm, focusing on something normal while I figure out how to approach my relatives." She looked relieved, but also concerned. "You don't have to force yourself if it's too much." He managed a small, crooked smile. "Nah, I'm actually grateful for the distraction. Besides, this is your dream, growing your brand, showing off these national parks. I'm all in." Before Kim could respond, the waitress arrived with menus and a pot of coffee. She greeted them cheerfully, clearly curious about travelers passing through so early. They placed orders, Malik opting for a plate of scrambled eggs with vegetables, Kim choosing blueberry pancakes. Once the waitress moved on, they fell into an easy conversation about the next few days. "I emailed that cousin one more time last night," Malik admitted quietly, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Still no answer, but it's fine. Even if we show up unannounced, I'll handle it." Kim's gaze softened. "I wish I could do more." He shook his head. "Having you here is enough, really." Their food arrived promptly, each plate brimming with diner-style comfort. Between bites, they mused about filming a joint video once they reached the next scenic stop. Malik talking about local plants, Kim pointing out how certain natural elements could inspire hair accents or color themes. It felt good, weaving their individual passions into something they could share. After breakfast, they hit the road again, bellies full and spirits lifted. The highway eventually merged with routes that snaked through small towns and pockets of wilderness. Kim fiddled with the radio, landing on a soft Rand B station that provided a mellow soundtrack to the passing view. A couple hours in, they found themselves on a long stretch of two-lane road cutting between mountains wearing thick forest canopies. Malik let the windows down a bit, letting the rush of fresh air fill the SUV. He glimpsed Kim leaning her head back against the seat, a small, contented smile on her face. These quieter stretches reminded him of the solitude he once cherished in New Hampshire, though now it felt right to have a partner along for the ride. At midday, they stopped at a scenic pull-off, boasting a view of a winding river below. Trees crowded the banks, and the water sparkled under the sun's rays. Kim hopped out immediately, phone in hand, capturing a quick video. Malik couldn't resist stepping to the guardrail to watch the water's lazy current. She joined him moments later, hooking an arm around his waist. "You okay?" she asked, ever tuned into his mood. Malik exhaled, letting the river's steady flow calm him. "Yeah, feels like we're inching closer to something big. I'm excited, but I'm still nervous about the cabin." Kim nodded, resting her head on his shoulder for a moment. "I get it, but we'll face it one step at a time," he nodded. They lingered briefly to soak in the view before climbing back into the SUV, continuing the trek. The afternoon light shifted from bright gold to a softer glow, and road signs indicated they were approaching the border that would eventually lead them into New York. One more state, and then New England would be on the horizon. By the time evening approached, they'd found another quiet town with a modest motel, the day's drive finally wearing on them. After checking in, they grabbed a simple takeout meal from a local sandwich shop, Malik opting for grilled chicken, Kim for a veggie sub, and settled at a small table in their motel room. Unwrapping her sandwich, Kim said, "We covered a lot of ground today." Malik nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, and I think by tomorrow evening we'll be within striking distance of New Hampshire." Kim's eyes flickered with a gentle concern. "Ready?" He breathed out a short laugh, half nervous, half genuine. "As ready as I'll ever be." And in the quiet of that motel room, with the hum of the road still lingering in his mind, Malik realized each day's journey had been preparing him, a step closer to reconciling the boy he had been in those northern mountains and the man he'd become in Georgia, and all the parts in between, shaped by memory, by Kim's unwavering support, and by the promise of something like home waiting just up ahead.
Chapter 13. Kim woke to the faint hiss of early traffic outside the motel and a thin stripe of golden sunlight peeking around the curtain. She stretched under the blanket, mind already sifting through what lay ahead. If they stuck to the plan, they'd be deep into New York by midday, and quite possibly within reach of New England by nightfall. The idea thrilled her. This journey was bringing her closer to corners of the country she'd only ever seen in pictures. She turned to see Malik still asleep in the other bed, his face relaxed. The subtle worry line between his brows, present off and on these past few days, had vanished while he slept. She wanted so badly for him to keep that ease when he confronted his family. Slipping out of bed quietly, she made her way to the bathroom, intent on dressing and gathering her thoughts before the day fully kicked off. A short while later, she found herself out on the motel's small balcony with a cup of complimentary coffee in hand. The air carried a crisp hint of autumn. She breathed it in, letting the anticipation settle into a gentle hum beneath her ribs. Her box braids felt neat and comfortable as always. She patted them absently, thinking about her next social media post. Maybe she would film a quick morning musings video, talking about the sense of wonder that came with waking up somewhere new nearly every day. Just then, she sensed movement behind her. Turning, she saw Malik stepping through the balcony door, hair slightly tousled, eyes still adjusting to the brightening sky. "Morning," he said, voice husky. She offered him a soft smile. "Morning. There's still coffee inside if you want some." He nodded and disappeared for a moment, returning with his own steaming cup. They stood side by side, the balcony railing at hip level, gazing down at the parking lot where a few other travelers loaded bags into cars. Overhead, a seagull, or maybe a hawk, she couldn't quite tell, circled lazily against a pale blue sky. "Feel ready for another day on the road?" she asked, sipping her coffee. Malik exhaled softly. "I am. Each day we get closer, and I'm oddly relieved. Might as well face what's waiting instead of dragging it out." She nudged him gently with her elbow. "We'll face it together." He shot her a grateful look. "I know." They finished their coffee in a comfortable silence before packing up and checking out of the motel. Within minutes, they were back on the highway, merging into the traffic that funneled them north. Kim took in the scenery, more rolling hills that slowly gave way to taller ridges. At one point, they passed a sprawling lake that shimmered in the morning light, and she insisted they pull off briefly to take photos. She managed a quick video clip, herself in front of the glistening water, box braids fluttering in a light breeze, narrating a short travel tip about seizing every opportunity to appreciate natural beauty. Malik watched with an amused half smile from near the SUV. By midday, the highway signs began referencing Albany and other upstate destinations. Kim chatted about potential lunch stops, scanning the map for any local eateries that caught her eye. They settled on a small family-run diner that boasted homemade pies, which was more than enough incentive for them. Over a plate of roasted veggie sandwiches, they discussed how best to plan the next leg, possibly pushing all the way to southern Vermont. As the afternoon deepened, so did the swirl of excitement in Kim's chest. They really were doing this. A new state line awaited them, another puzzle piece in the grand patchwork of their cross-country journey. She caught glimpses of Malik's expression, noticing how his steady calm never wavered, but the edges of his mouth hinted at a blend of restlessness and determination. She reached over the console and let her fingers lightly graze his arm. "We'll be in New England soon?" she said gently. He nodded, eyes fixed on the road. "Yeah, and then New Hampshire," he murmured. There was a faint tremor in his voice, like a chord struck deep within him. Kim gave his arm a small, reassuring squeeze. "One step at a time," she repeated, more for him than herself. He glanced her way, the gratitude in his gaze enough to warm her from within. With that, they drove on, sun dipping ever so slightly lower, leaving the miles to unfurl before them. The path to New Hampshire might be lined with questions and memories, but with every passing hour, Kim felt more certain they could handle whatever came next, together.
Chapter 14. The late afternoon sun lengthened the shadows across the highway as Malik guided the SUV steadily north. Every so often he glanced at the green exit signs, marking towns that grew increasingly unfamiliar yet somehow felt closer to home. Next stop, Vermont. Then, inevitably, New Hampshire. The thought sent a tight rush through his chest, a tangle of anticipation and worry. Kim sat beside him, double-checking route details on her phone. She hadn't said much for the past 30 minutes, content to hum along with the low melody on the radio. Malik appreciated her calm presence. She never rushed him or pushed for conversation when he drifted into introspection. He was lost in thought again, imagining the cabin in New Hampshire, senses filled with memories of pine needles underfoot, the echo of his grandfather's voice, the flicker of a lantern in the dark. The persistent question nagged him. Would his distant relatives even want to see him? There was no guarantee. The small part of him that was still that lonely kid braced for rejection. Kim's gentle voice broke the quiet. "Looks like we'll cross into Vermont soon," she said, glancing his way. "We could either stop early or drive a bit farther so we're closer to the border in the morning." Malik exhaled, rolling tension from his shoulders. "Let's push on for a bit. I want to wake up tomorrow practically at New Hampshire's doorstep." She nodded, her eyes warm with understanding. "Got it." The SUV soon passed a large sign welcoming them into Vermont. They shared a fleeting, unspoken smile, continuing along winding roads that cut through hillsides dotted with old barns and farmland. Evening crept in, painting the sky in golds and purples. The air smelled faintly of grass and distant fires whenever Malik cracked the window for a breath of cooler air. Eventually, after another stretch of quiet driving, they found an exit leading to a small town. A sign by the roadside promised a motel and a family restaurant with best maple desserts scrawled underneath. Kim perked up at that. "Maple desserts? I'm in." Malik smirked. "Works for me." He eased off the highway, letting the soft hum of the SUV slow as they approached a dimly lit main street. The buildings looked old-fashioned, many sporting large wraparound porches and small wooden signs overhead. A few pedestrians strolled the sidewalks, as though the rush of city life had never reached this quaint corner of Vermont. They pulled into a gravel lot beside a weather-worn building bearing a modest sign, Whispering Pines Motel, vacancy. The parking area was mostly empty save for a couple of cars scattered around. The soft glow of a single porch light cast long shadows over the lot. Kim glanced around thoughtfully. "I like it," she declared. "Feels cozy." Malik killed the engine, and they both stepped out, the evening air crisp enough that he found himself wanting a jacket. They grabbed their small overnight bags and made their way inside the tiny lobby, greeted by the faint smell of wood polish and an older gentleman sitting behind a battered desk. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," the man said, squinting kindly. "Room for two?" "Please," Malik replied, exchanging a quick look with Kim. She gave an approving nod. Moments later, they carried the little brass key down a short corridor lined with floral wallpaper. Their room stood at the far end, modest in size with two cozy beds, a small table, and a window that framed a grove of pines rustling against the twilight sky. Once they'd dropped their things, Kim peered out the window, eyes bright with curiosity. "It's lovely here. Should we check out that restaurant? I'm too curious about those maple desserts now." Malik chuckled, shaking off the lingering tension from the drive. "Absolutely." They left the motel and strolled down the quiet main street, guided by a string of vintage-style lamps illuminating the pavement. The family restaurant turned out to be a snug wooden building with a wide porch. Inside, a handful of patrons chatted over comfort food, the soft clink of utensils filling the air. A waitress waved them to a booth near a window, and they slid in with a mutual sigh of relief. Malik let his eyes drift over the menu. Rustic items dominated the list: pot pies, hearty stews, and of course a section devoted to maple treats. He pictured his grandfather's cabin again, how he'd tap a few maple trees in early spring, collecting sap in battered metal buckets. The memory flitted away almost as quickly as it came, replaced by Kim's gentle voice. "Oh my goodness, they have a maple pecan pie! That's gotta be good," she said, scanning the dessert list with an enthusiasm that made him smile. "And maple walnut cake, and even maple latte. This place is maple heaven." He laughed quietly, tension dissolving in the face of her excitement. "We can share a few if you want." They placed their orders, each opting for simple comfort food. Kim a vegetable pot pie, and Malik a roast chicken plate. While waiting, they sipped on iced tea and took in the easy rhythm of the restaurant. A mother helped her toddler color on a kid's menu in a corner booth, while a gray-haired couple split a plate of fries at the counter, engaged in lazy conversation. It all felt so normal, so unhurried. Kim rested her elbows on the table, leaning closer with a soft look. "So by tomorrow we'll be right by New Hampshire," she said. "You doing okay?" Malik paused, exhaling slowly. He searched her kind brown eyes for the reassurance he knew she offered. "I am. Nervous, yeah? But it's almost time, right? Been a long time coming." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand, her braids swaying as she nodded. "I'm here. Whatever happens, happens. At least we'll try." He squeezed back a wordless thank you. Their food arrived soon after, steaming and fragrant, a warmth against the cool evening outside. They ate with relish, swapping bites now and then, and saving room for what Kim deemed the main event, the maple desserts. A few minutes later, the waitress returned with a slice of maple pecan pie and a maple walnut cake side by side on plates. The smell alone made Kim's eyes go wide. She took a forkful of the cake, nodding her approval. "You have to try this." Malik obliged, savored the sugary tang, and grinned. "Okay, that's dangerously good." They swapped plates and sampled each dessert until both were nearly gone, moaning in contentment. As the waitress cleared away empty plates and left the bill, Kim sank back into the booth, patting her stomach. "I don't know how I'm going to move after this." Malik snorted softly, fishing out his wallet. "We'll roll out, I guess." They settled the bill and stepped into the night. The sky was deep indigo, studded with the first bright stars, and a gentle hush lay over the small Vermont town. Strolling back to the motel felt like the perfect wind down to a day of traveling. Now, more than ever, the reality that they were nearly there, on the cusp of New Hampshire, settled in. Back in their snug motel room, Malik flicked on a small lamp, sending a warm glow across the floral quilt. Kim kicked off her shoes, then stood by the window, peering at the shadowy pines outside. "You know," she said quietly, "I think tomorrow's going to be okay, no matter what we find when we get there." Malik walked over, standing behind her so he could follow her gaze into the dark. "I hope so. I'm ready to see it. Even if my relatives aren't thrilled, I need to stand in front of that cabin again. To make peace, I guess." Kim turned, resting a hand on his chest. "We will." Her voice was gentle but sure. He pulled her close, letting her warmth and conviction seep into him. For a long moment, they stood in the hush of that motel room, silhouettes against a backdrop of pine trees and starlight. Tomorrow would bring them to the doorstep of the place he once called home, the cabin that shaped him, and possibly the family that had once felt like strangers. With Kim here, steadfast, understanding, Malik felt those old fears ease a fraction more. Tonight they'd rest. Tomorrow, they'd cross the final stretch into New Hampshire's embrace. Together, they would find whatever waited there, forging the next chapter of their shared journey. No turning back.
Chapter 15. Kim woke before dawn to the faint rattle of a passing car outside the motel. She lay still for a moment, recalling the gentle night spent in this small Vermont town. The memory of the maple desserts made her smile, even as her thoughts jumped ahead to the day's plan. They'd be crossing into New Hampshire. By sunset, maybe even sooner, they'd be close to Malik's childhood cabin. With a quiet stretch, Kim slipped from the bed and padded to the window. Pale morning light revealed silhouettes of pines against a sky that had yet to decide between gray and pink. She hugged her arms around herself, taking in the subtle hush beyond the glass. They were so close to the place that had shaped Malik's entire life. A flicker of both excitement and worry stirred in her chest. Behind her, Malik stirred. "Morning," he said, voice husky with sleep. She turned, noticing the way he blinked himself awake. "Morning," she answered softly. "Ready for the big day?" He pushed himself up on one elbow, eyes meeting hers with a hint of nerves. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "Let's do it." Within the hour, they dressed, checked out, and loaded the SUV. A cool breeze swept across the motel parking lot, sending a gentle rustle through the pines. Kim braided a couple of loose strands from her hair, securing them behind one ear, then hopped into the passenger seat. The day felt electric, charged with the promise of both reunion and unknowns. They drove out of the small town, following a winding road that cut through rolling hills, still waking in the first flush of daylight. Kim busied herself browsing a map on her phone. "If we stay on this route," she said, pointing at the screen, "we should cross into New Hampshire in under an hour." Malik nodded. His profile was calm, but she sensed the tension coiling beneath. She reached out, letting her hand rest lightly on his arm. "1 mile at a time," she reminded him. A small smile curved his lips. "1 mile at a time," he echoed. They listened to a mellow R&B playlist as the SUV hugged gentle curves in the road, the landscape shifting toward taller hills and pockets of evergreens. The moment the welcome sign for New Hampshire came into view, Kim's heart fluttered, and she found herself holding her breath. Malik slowed slightly, passing under the sign that read, "Welcome to New Hampshire. Live free or die." A wry little grin touched his face at the motto. Kim exhaled, feeling a subdued rush, like crossing an invisible threshold. She couldn't help wondering what it felt like for him to see that sign, to be back in the state where he once lived off the grid with his grandfather. She peeked at him, noticing his fingers tighten on the wheel. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded, Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. "Feels surreal," he admitted. "I've been gone for so long. Part of me never thought I'd come back." Kim gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. "You're not alone this time." For a few miles, the road cut through dense woods. The canopy overhead let in splinters of sunlight that danced across the dashboard. Then the woods opened onto a scenic overlook, one that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Malik pulled over, compelled by habit or by that lingering ranger spirit within him. They climbed out, stepping onto a gravel patch that overlooked a valley of towering pines and in the distance the faint shape of mountains. "Are those the mountains near?" Kim began softly. Malik gazed out, eyes fixed. "They might be," he said, voice subdued. "Hard to tell from here, but it's possible." Kim let the hush settle, taking in the crisp air that carried a faint scent of pine sap. She could see the reflection of resolve in Malik's eyes. He was steeling himself, bracing for the next steps, reaching out to family, seeing that cabin again. They stayed there briefly, Kim recording a short panoramic video with her phone for her social feed. But she kept it muted. No fancy commentary this time. It felt too personal, too significant. Let the moment speak for itself, she decided. When they resumed the drive, Kim spotted signs referencing small towns and villages. Malik mentioned how, as a kid, he used to pass some of these names in old, battered trucks with his grandfather, heading to town for supplies once every few weeks. The nostalgia in his tone made her ache for him. There was fondness in his memories, but also a whiff of sadness at what was lost. By mid-morning, they reached a modest town nestled along a winding river. The plan was to fill the gas tank, grab a quick breakfast, and confirm directions to the area near the cabin. After that, well, there wouldn't be much in the way of distractions left. Kim kept a close eye on Malik, ready to suggest a break if the emotional weight got too heavy, but he pressed forward with quiet determination. In the heart of that small town, they found a diner with a bright, silver exterior, perhaps an old train car model. Inside, the few patrons cast curious glances at their arrival. Malik ordered a light meal, but Kim could see him absently stirring his coffee, barely sipping. She gently touched his knee under the table. "We can slow down," she offered. He shook his head, lips tilting into a half-smile. "It's okay. I think going forward is best." After paying, they returned to the SUV, the engine humming a steady cadence under Malik's skilled hands. The next turn led them onto a narrower road, the trees growing denser, the sense of closeness to his childhood forest intensifying. Kim's heart fluttered on his behalf. She prepared herself for whatever lay ahead, a confrontation or a cold welcome, or maybe, just maybe, an open door. They pressed on, the canopy of trees forming a whispering tunnel above them. Kim glanced at Malik, whose gaze stayed fixed ahead. She mirrored his resolve with a gentle breath, remembering her own promise. Step by step, she'd be there, no matter the outcome. And so they drove deeper into the place that had shaped him, the place he once called home, brimming with memories, some joyful, some haunting. Kim felt a quiet certainty. They were on the cusp of something monumental. It might not be easy, But in the hush of the forest and the warmth of Malik's presence, she believed they'd find the strength to face it.
Chapter 16. Malik eased the SUV off the paved road onto a narrower dirt track framed by tall pines. The branches arched overhead, filtering sunlight into a dappled pattern that flickered across the windshield. Every bump and dip felt like a jolt of memory. He recognized the curve in the path, the old signpost leaning at a crooked angle, and the faint sound of a creek just beyond the tree line. All of it whispered, "You've been here before." Beside him, Kim watched with quiet encouragement. She hadn't spoken for the past few minutes, sensing the knot of tension in his chest. He spared a small glance her way, grateful for her steady presence. Then he turned his focus back to the narrow trail. Up ahead, the forest opened into a modest clearing. There it stood, the cabin. A rush of emotion hit Malik so hard he almost forgot to brake. The structure was smaller than he remembered, weathered wood and a sagging porch. But it was undeniably home, or it had been once. He cut the engine, silence rushing in. Birds called from the branches, and somewhere a gust of wind rustled the undergrowth. Malik's heart pounded. The place looked lived in, but not in the way he remembered. He noticed a newer truck parked off to the side, a few extra chairs on the porch, and an unfamiliar wind chime clinking from the eaves. It all felt simultaneously foreign and intimate. Kim shifted in her seat. "You okay?" she asked gently. He cleared his throat, barely trusting his own voice. "Yeah, just didn't think I'd see it again." She reached over and rested a hand on his shoulder, her warm squeeze grounding him. "We can wait here a minute. Breathe." He nodded, inhaling the woodsy air that seeped through the open window. After a few deep breaths, he opened the door and stepped out, gravel crunching underfoot. Kim joined him, quietly slipping her hand into his. Together, they approached the porch where the battered planks groaned under their weight. A moment later, the cabin door opened. A woman in her 40s wearing jeans and a plaid shirt stepped out. Her eyes flicked between Malik and Kim, curiosity written plain on her face. Malik's stomach clenched with nerves. "Hi," he managed, voice low. My name's Malik. My grandfather used to live here." The woman studied him, then exhaled softly. Recognition kindled in her eyes. "I know who you are," she said. "I'm Nora. We're cousins, I guess." Malik's pulse quickened. He'd heard that name in passing, in the old letters his grandfather once mentioned. A cousin from a distant branch of the family. "Nora," he repeated, testing the word. "It's nice to meet you." She glanced at Kim, who offered a polite smile. "This is Kim," Malik explained. "My fiancé." "Hi," Kim said softly. Nora nodded in greeting, then gave Malik a long, thoughtful look. "Didn't expect you'd ever come back. Not after, well." She shifted her weight, half turning as if uncertain whether to invite them in. Malik felt the sting of old hurt. "I wasn't sure either," he admitted. "But I'm here. Thought I'd see if we could talk." He cleared his throat. "About the cabin, about family." Nora let out a breath that seemed caught between relief and apprehension. Slowly, she stepped aside, gesturing to the open door. "Come on in. We can figure it out." Kim squeezed Malik's hand. He nodded, heart drumming as he followed Nora inside. The cabin's interior smelled of wood smoke and the faint tang of pine. Some furniture looked new, a sturdy sofa and a modern lamp, while other pieces were clearly remnants from when his grandfather lived here. The old stone fireplace, the battered bookshelf in the corner, and even the handmade wooden table with its uneven legs. Emotion flared in Malik's chest, a mix of memory and longing. "Nice place," Kim offered, voice warm. Nora forced a small smile. "I've been doing my best to keep it up. Didn't want to see it rot." Malik walked to the fireplace mantel, running a finger along the rough wood. A swirl of dust rose, tinted by the golden light from the cabin's single window. "I'm glad you took care of it," he said softly. He turned to face Nora. "I know we never really talked after my grandfather passed. I'm sorry for that." She folded her arms across her chest, expression guarded. "We didn't know how to reach you, and when we got in contact," she pressed her lips together, then sighed. "It felt complicated." Malik swallowed, images of those last weeks in New Hampshire flooding back, the funeral, the sudden legal notices, the heartbreak of losing the only family he'd ever truly known. He felt Kim's hand brush against his back, a steadying presence. "Look," he began quietly, "I'm not here to argue about who owns what. I just wanted to see the place. see if there was a chance for us to know each other. Granddad always told me we had relatives out there. I just never. He trailed off, shrugging. Nora lowered her gaze. He cared about you, she murmured. Even in those letters he wrote me, he'd talk about you all the time. How proud he was that you wanted to work in nature like him. Malik's throat tightened. Hearing that from her lips made the grief feel fresh, yet oddly comforting. I owe him everything, he said. He taught me all I know. Silence lingered, heavy and uncertain. Kim stepped forward slightly, the soft scratch of her shoes against the wooden floor catching Nora's attention. Malik's been wanting to reconnect. Maybe we can figure out a way to share the memories here, even if it's just talking or showing him around to see what you've done. It means a lot to him. Nora's eyes flicked from Kim to Malik, then back again. Slowly she nodded. Sure, we can talk. A hint of a genuine smile touched her face. Not like we don't have time, right? Malik exhaled a pent-up breath, relief crashing in. It wasn't an open-armed welcome, but it wasn't a slammed door either. Thank you, he said softly. Nora gestured for them to sit at the small table, clearing off a few stray papers. Coffee's on. Let me grab you both a cup. She paused, glancing at Malik once more. Feel free to look around if you want. I kept most of your grandfather's books over there on the shelf. Couldn't bring myself to throw them out. Malik nodded, gratitude and a bittersweet ache welling inside him. As Nora disappeared into a side room, he drifted toward the bookshelf, Kim at his side. His gaze landed on dusty spines, titles about wild foraging, local flora and fauna, survival guides. He remembered them all. Nights spent reading by lantern light while his grandfather dozed in a rocking chair. Kim rested a hand on his arm. He turned, meeting her gentle eyes. In that moment, words felt insufficient, so he simply covered her hand with his. This was the place he'd once called home, now altered, yet still bearing traces of the life he'd lived. It wasn't closure yet, but it was a start. Behind them, Nora returned, steaming mugs in hand, setting them on the table. A flicker of cautious hope lit Malik's chest as he approached to join her. One small step at a time, and with Kim's unwavering support, maybe, just maybe, they could begin a new chapter of family in these old, familiar walls.
Chapter 17. Kim watched quietly as Malik moved around the small cabin, pausing at each piece of furniture like he was greeting an old friend. His shoulders were tense, but his gaze carried a soft, nostalgic glow. She followed, close enough to offer silent support, but not so close as to crowd him. After all, this was his childhood home, now inhabited by family he barely knew. In the kitchen, Nora, Malik's cousin, rummaged through drawers, retrieving mugs. The clink of ceramic against the countertop punctuated the hush. Kim cleared her throat, feeling the weight of the moment. She reminded herself that she was here not just as Malik's partner in adventure, but as his fiancé. They'd agreed that when meeting his relatives, they should be honest about their commitment. Nora turned, one hand braced on her hip. "Coffee's almost ready," she said. Then her eyes flicked to Kim, lingering a moment. "I'm still processing that you two showed up. We never expected you'd come back, Malik." Kim gently stepped forward. "He's wanted to for a long time," she explained. "When we got engaged, we started planning this trip to visit national parks. Visiting this cabin was important for him. He wanted to reconnect with the place and the family." Nora looked between the two of them, her defensive posture softening just a bit. "Engaged, huh? Congratulations. Guess there's a lot I've missed." She nodded slowly. "You should know. I didn't try to push anyone out. When I heard about your grandfather, I felt it was my responsibility to at least keep this cabin from falling into disrepair." Malik inhaled, shoulders tensing before dropping again. "I appreciate that, I truly do." He paused, a muscle working in his jaw. "I wish we'd spoken sooner, but life pulled me to Georgia. Now here we are." Nora released a sigh, her expression turning contrite. "I'm sorry it all happened the way it did. I was a teenager when I first heard about him, your grandfather, and how he'd cut himself off from most of the family. Once I inherited the cabin, it felt weird stepping into someone else's life, even if we were blood." "Understandable," Kim offered softly, crossing her arms in a gentle self-hug. "It's not easy piecing together family history, especially with all the distance between you." A small beep from the coffee machine drew their attention. Nora moved to pour the steaming liquid into the mugs, the air filled with the rich aroma, blending with the ever-present scent of pine that seeped through the cabin walls. She slid a mug toward Malik, another toward Kim, and one for herself. "We can sit," Nora said, pointing to a simple wooden table near the window. They gathered around, the table's surface worn with decades of use. Kim settled beside Malik, resting a hand lightly on his arm. She saw a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, a silent thanks for her calm presence. He cleared his throat, drawing in a breath. "I left here when Granddad died, and everything happened so fast," he began. "I went down to Georgia, found a job as a park ranger, built a life there. Then I met Kim and, well," a shadow of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "She convinced me it was time to face the past." Kim felt a warm flush of pride at the mention, but kept her focus on Nora's reaction. The older woman nodded, cupping her coffee. "I remember hearing bits and pieces. You were always in the woods as a kid, apparently. Your grandfather wrote that you had a gift for reading the land." A moment of wistfulness passed in Malik's eyes. "Yeah, he taught me everything. Hunting, fishing, tracking. We barely had electricity, lived off the grid for so long." He let out a quiet laugh. "Kim can tell you I still prefer the quiet life, maybe a bit too much." Kim offered a fond smile. "It's not too much. Just enough," she teased lightly, hoping to keep the atmosphere from dipping into sorrow. Nora's gaze flicked over the braided style Kim wore. "So you travel the country together? A road trip?" Kim nodded. "Visiting national parks. I'm a hairdresser. I do a lot of braiding styles on social media, but we combine it with Malik's ranger expertise. We share videos about conservation, about nature. It's sort of our thing." Malik leaned forward slightly. "This trip was meant to be about seeing more of America's beauty. Plus, I wanted to show Kim where I grew up. I honestly didn't expect you to be here, but I'm glad you are." Nora's features softened further. "I'm glad too," she admitted quietly. "It's been lonely sometimes, keeping this place up. I didn't know if I was doing it for myself or for you." She gestured around the cabin. "I tried to preserve the more important things. I switched out the old couch and a few other pieces, but a lot is still your granddad's." Malik glanced around, his eyes landing on shelves lined with faded photographs. Some he recognized, some that must have belonged to older relatives. "It's surreal," he confessed. "Seeing it half the same, half changed." Kim could almost feel the mixture of relief and sadness radiating off him. She threaded her fingers through his, offering a slight squeeze. He met her gaze, then turned back to Nora. "I'm not here to make claims or anything," Malik said, voice calm. "Just wanted a chance to stand here, to remember what it felt like, maybe share some of it with Kim, if that's okay." Nora set her mug down, her expression thoughtful. "It's more than okay. We're family, even if it's distant. I'd like to show you what I've done with the place. Maybe you can stay for dinner, and we can talk more." A wave of gratitude surged in Kim. She knew how important it was for Malik to have this moment, to reconnect without confrontation. She brushed her thumb lightly along the back of his hand, feeling his tension ebb. "That would be wonderful," Kim said softly, speaking for them both. "We're not in a rush." Nora nodded, picking up her coffee again. "Then let me give you a quick tour after this, and maybe you can tell me a bit more about your grandfather, about what he was really like. I only knew the stories he wrote in letters." A faint smile curved Malik's lips. "I'd like that," he said, a quiet relief in his tone. They lapsed into gentle conversation, sipping coffee in the warm hush of the old cabin. Outside, the winds sighed through the pines, and Kim realized with a wash of calm that this was the start of something positive. They weren't just claiming lost property or dredging up old disputes. They were bridging a gap. If anything, returning here had given Malik the chance to piece together the past with a clearer heart, and she was honored to stand by him as he did. As Nora gathered their empty mugs and moved to the sink, Kim and Malik shared a soft, understanding glance. Their journey had brought them across states and through countless small adventures, all to land here, in a cabin that held so many of Malik's memories. With the tension now easing, Kim felt a surge of confidence about their shared future, one that drew from both his roots and the life they were building together.
Chapter 18. Malik followed Nora down the narrow hallway, the worn floorboards creaking beneath their steps. Kim trailed alongside him, her gentle presence rooting him in the moment. Nora paused at each doorway, pointing out small changes she'd made. Fresh coat of paint here, replaced curtains there, while still preserving the cabin's original character. "As you know, this room was your grandfather's," Nora said, stopping at a closed door. Her voice held a note of both respect and hesitation. "I left it mostly alone, apart from dusting and airing it out." Malik's stomach gave a little flip as he reached for the old brass knob. Kim rested a comforting hand on his shoulder, and he pushed the door open. A wave of memories flooded in. The faint odor of pipe tobacco that once clung to the walls, the quilt his grandfather used to fold meticulously each morning, the large wooden chest at the foot of the bed. Now the bed was stripped, and a thin layer of dust coated the windowsill, but the essence of the space felt unchanged. He stepped inside, the soft footfalls of Nora and Kim behind him. His gaze landed on the chest, intricately carved with mountain motifs. He remembered storing his first fishing rod there, the one he'd carved with his grandfather's help. Nora cleared her throat. "I haven't opened the trunk. I figured if there were any personal items in there, they belonged to you." Malik nodded, gratitude stirring in his chest. "Thank you for leaving it be." He approached the chest, kneeling down to brush off a light film of dust. Kim joined him, kneeling at his side. Gently he raised the lid and they peered inside. Stacks of old notebooks, a couple of faded Polaroid pictures, and a small burlap pouch greeted them. His breath caught at the sight of a battered journal on top. He recognized it instantly. His grandfather's handwritten notes about local plants and wildlife. "That's Granddad's field journal," he murmured, picking it up as though it were made of glass. He flipped through a few pages, scrawled handwriting naming plant species, tracking dates for the changing seasons, occasional sketches of birds. The corners of his eyes prickled. In an instant, Kim's hand found his. Nora watched from the doorway, arms crossed over her chest in a protective stance. Her expression held something akin to relief. "He wrote me letters, but I never got to see those journals. Guess he was private about some things." Malik nodded, carefully closing the journal. For a moment, no one spoke. The cabin's silence enveloped them in shared reverence for the man who had once called this place home. Eventually, Nora gestured toward the next door. "Let me show you the rest. I expanded the pantry to store more canned goods. Figured if I was going to live out here part-time, I needed better food storage." They followed her into a small kitchen area, where old counters met new shelves lined with jars of pickled vegetables, homemade jams, and dried herbs. The aroma reminded Malik of mornings spent canning preserves with his grandfather, back when living off the land was their everyday norm. Warmth bloomed in his chest, an odd mixture of longing and comfort. Kim's eyes lit up at the sight of the jars. "Wow, you've been busy," she said softly. "It's impressive." Nora shrugged, a faint smile touching her lips. "Couldn't let the place stay stuck in the past, but I tried not to erase it either." Malik appreciated the balance. He stepped to the window and gazed out at a slope of pine trees. This vantage point used to be his favorite spot to watch dawn roll in, the golden light filtering through the branches. He murmured quietly, "It's good to see it cared for." Nora set her hands on her hips, looking between Malik and Kim. "You said earlier I should show you around outside too," she said. "We can do that now or after dinner. Your call." Malik exchanged a look with Kim, who offered an encouraging nod. "Let's see it now," he decided, emotions still buzzing from seeing his grandfather's room. Maybe stepping onto the porch and walking the land would ground him further. They headed out the back door, emerging onto a simple porch overlooking a patch of garden. Beyond it, tall pines stretched toward the sky, and a narrow footpath led down to a creek whose soft trickle was audible in the hush. Malik's breath caught. This was where he'd learned to fish. His memory supplied the image of him, small and eager, net in hand, while his grandfather taught him how to read the water's flow. Nora stood with them, arms folded. "I tried to keep the garden going," she said, nodding toward a row of tomatoes and herbs. "Not sure if I'm doing it right, but I'm learning." Malik found a gentle smile, imagining how his grandfather would react. He'd appreciate the effort, he said. He loved teaching people how to live off the land. Kim's hand slipped into his, and he squeezed it gratefully. Together, they took a few steps down the footpath, the sound of the creek growing louder. Nora followed, content to let them lead at their own pace. Malik's eyes swept the familiar scene. The weathered logs marking the edge of the garden, the cluster of wildflowers near a mossy rock. He felt a yearning to relive each moment, but also a sense of pride that someone was here, keeping it alive. After a short walk, they reached the creek, water flowing clear over a bed of smooth stones. Malik crouched, dipping his fingers into the cool current. He closed his eyes for a brief second, remembering. It wasn't the same as before, he wasn't the same, but the essence remained. Behind him, Kim stood quiet, absorbing every detail. Finally she spoke, voice soft. "It's beautiful here. I can see why you missed it." Malik rose, heart swelling with quiet gratitude. "Yeah," he agreed. "I just didn't know if I'd ever get it back." Nora took a cautious step forward, and I didn't know if I was a trespasser in someone else's story or caretaker of it. Malik turned, meeting her gaze earnestly. "I think caretaker's the right word," he said, "and maybe from here on we can share it." A flicker of relief crossed Nora's face, and she nodded. "I'd like that." In the fading afternoon light, the three of them stood by the creek, Malik with Kim at his side, Nora a few steps away, and for the first time Malik felt the old wound of his grandfather's passing begin to mend. This place was no longer just a memory shrouded in regret. It was part of his present, part of their shared history. And as he heard Kim's calm breath next to him, felt the cabin's closeness, and saw the acceptance in Nora's eyes, he knew they were forging a new path forward, one rooted in understanding and respect.
Chapter 19. Kim trailed a few steps behind Malik and Nora as they meandered back toward the cabin, her gaze wandering over the tall pines and the late-day sunlight that painted the clearing in soft gold. Although the air was cool, it carried a gentle warmth she associated with peace. A small sigh escaped her. Malik had found what he'd come for. Not just memories, but acceptance. From the porch, she spotted the old wine chime tinkling against the siding. It gave the evening hush a tender soundtrack, one that made her think of home in Sweet Gum Meadows and of the steps leading to Rochelle's diner, where she and Malik had said farewell to friends. So much had changed in such a short time, yet the quiet sense of belonging felt the same. Nora gestured for them to head inside. "I'll start dinner. It's nothing fancy, but it'd mean a lot if you stayed." She cast a hesitant look at Malik, who simply nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. Inside, Kim helped by setting out plates and silverware on the small wooden table. She spotted Malik gently placing his grandfather's field journal and Polaroids on a nearby shelf, as though giving them a new place of honor. Nora moved around the modest kitchen area, preparing ingredients for a simple stew. "Anything I can do?" Kim asked, stepping over to check the veggies Nora was chopping. Nora tilted her head, motioning for Kim to join her. "If you'd like, you can slice those carrots. I have a chicken broth simmering, so we'll toss everything in soon." Kim took over the cutting board. She fell into a rhythm. Slice, tap the knife, gather the pieces. It reminded her of cooking sessions back in Sweet Gum Meadows with her girlfriends, or the quiet times she spent alone, making a small dinner for herself. But here, the sense of closeness was tinged with something new. The feeling of bridging an old gap between Malik and this distant relative. She stole a glance at him across the room, noticing the way his shoulders carried less tension now. When the stew began to simmer, Nora gestured for them to sit. A soft hush settled over the small cabin living space. Malik sank onto the couch, Kim beside him, while Nora occupied a wooden chair that looked as old as the cabin itself. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound, the gentle bubbling of broth on the stovetop. Finally, Nora cleared her throat. "So, your wedding. Have you set a date?" Malik's eyes darted to Kim, and Kim felt a warm flush creep over her cheeks. "Not yet," she admitted. "We've been a bit busy traveling, but we do have some ideas in mind. We're thinking something small, intimate." Nora smiled, almost shyly. "Well, if you'd consider it, maybe you could do something here in New Hampshire. You know, if it feels right." She looked unsure, as though she might be overstepping. A gentle flutter stirred in Kim's chest. She'd grown fond of the idea of a simple ceremony, surrounded by nature. And here, in a place so tied to Malik's roots, it was a touching thought. She glanced at him to gauge his reaction. His eyes shone with gratitude. It's a lovely offer," he said softly. We'll think about it. It would be nice to celebrate somewhere that meant so much to my grandfather. Nora nodded, relief and maybe a touch of excitement playing on her features. Take your time, she added. No pressure. Kim leaned into Malik, letting her shoulder brush his, a silent sign of support. The afternoon shadows had begun to stretch across the cabin floor, promising a cooler evening outside. She could already imagine a few close friends gathered here, the wind chimes singing overhead, the creek softly trickling in the distance, a perfect harmony of Georgia warmth and New Hampshire tradition. When Nora got up to check the stew, Kim slipped her hand into Malik's. He turned, meeting her gaze, and she saw the emotional weight of the day spinning in his eyes. Grief, love, relief, hope. Leaning in, she spoke barely above a whisper. I'm proud of you, she said, and I'm happy we're here. His hand tightened around hers, and in that quiet corner of the cabin, words felt unnecessary. They'd come looking for closure, for family, and for roots Malik feared he'd lost. Now they seemed closer than ever to forging new bonds, bridging past, present, and a future that stretched out as boundless as the forests beyond the door.
Chapter 20. Nora ladled steaming stew into 3 bowls, the rich scent of herbs and roasted vegetables filling the cabin's modest kitchen. Malik stood behind the small table, letting Kim slide past him to take a seat. Outside, the late-day light grew soft, creating long shadows through the window and draping the space in a cozy dusk. He approached the table with a curious mix of gratitude and lingering nerves. All day, he'd walked through places he'd once known by heart, a hallway that used to echo his grandfather's footsteps, a creek that had taught him patience and respect for nature. Yet, never had he imagined sharing this meal with a cousin he hadn't known existed until a few years back, or with the woman, no, fiancée, who had encouraged him to reconnect. A subtle warmth spread in his chest at the thought. Hope you like chicken stew, Nora said, sliding a bowl toward him. It's simple, but it's hearty. Smells incredible, Kim said, inhaling the savory aroma before thanking Nora with a warm smile. Malik murmured his appreciation as well, then quietly settled in. The table was small enough that their elbows nearly brushed. He noticed Kim's bright eyes flick around, taking in every inch of the cabin's interior, soaking up the final wave of day's end. Meanwhile, Nora wiped her hands on a dishcloth and joined them. They began eating in near silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons against ceramic and the distant whisper of a breeze beyond the window. Eventually, Kim broke the hush with a gentle question about the orchard of trees behind the cabin, whether Nora planned to grow more produce next summer. Nora shrugged slightly. I'd like to, but I'm still learning. This was my first real year trying a garden this size. She gave Malik a tentative look. I know you learned a lot about farming from your grandfather. Maybe you could share some tips? He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth, then lowered it back into the stew. Sure, he said softly. He taught me more about foraging than planting, but I remember a thing or two, especially about composting and homemade fertilizers. Relief flickered on Nora's face. That'd be great. Kim brightened. Maybe we can film a short segment on it if you're comfortable, like a practical tutorial. I've seen how people love step-by-step garden videos, especially if there's an environmental angle. Malik let a small smile play on his lips. I guess that would fit our channel vibe, huh? Nora quirked an eyebrow. Channel? Kim, with a grin, explained about their social media presence. Her focus on hair and lifestyle, Malik's ranger knowledge, and how they meshed the two into a unique brand. At first, Nora appeared skeptical, but as Kim described their journey traveling to various national parks, filming tips on everything from plant identification to creative braided hairstyles and scenic locales, interest sparked in the older woman's eyes. I never thought about it that way, Nora admitted. Seems like it'd be fun, challenging, but fun. Malik nodded, recalling the times they'd balanced cameras on rocks for the perfect shot, or hiked up to a viewpoint at sunrise just to capture a few minutes of golden hour footage. It is a lot of work, he said, but it's worth it if it helps people appreciate nature. Nora smiled then, a touch of admiration slipping into her features. Sounds like something your grandfather would have been proud of. He always wanted folks to learn to live in harmony with the land. Malik's throat tightened. A wave of emotion washed over him, grief for the lost years, gratitude for the chance to reclaim them. Quietly, he set his spoon down and glanced at Kim, finding the understanding in her gaze that kept him steady. "I hope so," he managed. They lapsed into another bout of contented silence, finishing the stew in companionable bites. As dusk settled fully, Nora stood to light a small lantern near the window. The warm glow bounced off the cabin's wooden walls, reminding Malik of countless nights reading by flickering lantern light with his grandfather, far removed from the hum of electricity. When the dishes were washed and drying by the sink, the three migrated to the living area. Nora offered them seats on the new couch while she took an older rocker that creaked softly under her weight. Darkness pressed against the windows, and the wind chime on the porch tinkled with each passing breeze. "Since we're all here," Nora ventured, "maybe you could share some stories about your grandfather or just your life in Georgia." She looked at Malik with genuine curiosity, but also at Kim. "I'd like to know more about the family I didn't get a chance to know." Kim turned to Malik, waiting for him to speak. He drew a deep breath, sifting through memories. "He was strict at times," Malik began softly, "but he was fair. We lived without power for a good part of my childhood. He believed in self-reliance. I remember lighting candles to do homework, or reading by that lantern." A hint of a smile curved his lips. "He taught me to track deer by the smallest footprints, to fish in creeks using lines we made ourselves. It was isolating sometimes, but also magical." Nora listened intently, her fingers curled around the arm of the rocking chair. Kim rested a supportive hand on Malik's arm, encouraging him to continue. "As for Georgia," he went on, "I moved there not long after he passed. Ended up becoming a park ranger in a small town called Sweet Gum Meadows. People there embraced me, helped me feel less alone, and that's where I met Kim." He nodded toward her, the corners of his eyes softening with affection. "She made me realize that not all connections require blood, but then she also reminded me I still had blood family I'd never met." A faint blush tinted Kim's cheeks at his praise. "I just told him that sometimes going forward means going back, facing old places, old feelings." Nora's chair gave another soft creak. "Sounds like you've both come a long way. I'm sorry we didn't do this sooner. Maybe we could have helped each other not feel so alone." Malik swallowed, forcing down the lump in his throat. "Yeah, maybe, but we're here now." The words felt like an anchor, grounding him in this moment. They exchanged more stories, Nora sharing how she'd discovered the inheritance papers and felt torn about whether she had the right to make the cabin her own. Kim recounted their adventures in Shenandoah and a few other national parks, describing star-filled nights and early sunrise hikes that delighted Nora. Time slipped by, marked only by the lantern's glow and the hush of wind outside. When at last Nora yawned, Kim and Malik exchanged glances, realizing how late it was. Malik cleared his throat. We can find a motel in the nearest town if you prefer," he offered. "We don't want to impose." Nora shook her head. "Don't be silly, we've got a spare room, used to be for storage, but I can make space. Unless you'd rather have your own space, up to you." Malik felt Kim's warm gaze on him. For a beat, he considered retreating, giving Nora some distance, but something about her invitation was earnest, and this day had already been about bridging the gaps. "If you're sure," he said, voice hushed. Nora's nod held a quiet conviction. "I am. Your family." Those two words were enough to settle it. Kim squeezed his hand and he exhaled, tension unwinding like a tight cord finally loosened. They'd come looking for closure, for a sense of belonging, and found more than he dared hope. The night might still hold some sadness for the lost years, but a tender promise colored the horizon, family ties renewed, a future where he could share his memories without bitterness or regret. As they rose to ready for the night, Nora stepped aside to prepare the guest room. Malik paused to turn down the lantern, leaving only a dim glow. Outside the cabin, a blanket of stars spread across the sky, just as it did in Sweet Gum Meadows. He caught Kim's eye, reaching for her. She leaned in, her braids brushing his shoulder. "We did it," she murmured, voice brimming with warmth. "Yeah," he whispered back, feeling the ghosts of the past rest at last. "We really did."
Chapter 21. Night set in around the cabin like a soft blanket. the wind chimes gentle tinkling, mingling with the hum of crickets beyond the walls. Kim stood by a small window in the spare room Nora had offered, peering out at the faint silhouettes of pines dancing under moonlight. A thread of quiet awe kept her breath shallow. The day had been monumental. Not only had they crossed state lines into Malik's past, but they had found acceptance where, for years, there was only unanswered silence. Behind her, Malik clicked off the single lamp, bathing the little room in silver-blue moon glow. The bed took up most of the space, with a dresser pushed against one wall. Boxes of garden tools and old books had been hastily shoved aside to make room. It felt, to Kim, like a place in transition, much like their lives right now. She turned, letting her gaze settle on Malik. Even in the dim light, she caught the gentle relief etched on his face. The day's tension had seeped from his posture, replaced by an almost serene calm. "You okay?" she asked softly, crossing the short distance to lay a hand on his arm. He reached up, covering her hand with his. "I think so. Better than I expected, honestly. It's comforting to realize Nora isn't out to shut me out." His voice caught slightly, and he cleared his throat. "And I'm glad you're here." Kim's chest warmed at his admission. She squeezed his arm, a gentle smile curving her lips. "I'm proud of you, Malik. It's not easy facing old ghosts." He leaned his forehead against hers for a beat, letting the hush fill the space. Then, with a soft exhale, he stepped back. "We should probably get some rest. Tomorrow, we can see more of the land. Maybe show Nora some tips about composting or something." Kim laughed quietly. "You'll be teaching a crash course in living off the land before we know it." "Guess so." He returned, his smile holding that trace of playfulness she adored. She headed to the dresser to place her phone on top, noticing how the old wooden surface bore rings from cups long gone. Briefly, she imagined what it might be like to return here from time to time, visiting in the summer, combining her styling ventures with a simpler life for a few weeks. The idea nudged her heart with a flutter of excitement. Malik pulled down the covers on the bed, the springs letting out a small squeak. "It's not the plushest motel," he joked, "but I'll take it." Kim joined him, settling onto the mattress. The worn quilt felt surprisingly soft as she lay back. The window framed a slice of moonlit sky, a world away from city lights or even the gentle bustle of Sweet Gum Meadows. As they got comfortable, Kim felt a subtle tension return, an old habit of worrying about how each new day might unfold. But then she glanced at Malik. He stretched out beside her, gaze sliding back to the moonlit window. In that silent exchange, she understood he felt it too, the weight of stepping into tomorrow with more questions than answers. Yet there was also hope, a sense that they were forging something good here. "You know," she whispered, turning on her side to face him. "No matter how things progress with Nora, whether we keep coming back or not, I want you to remember this moment, the way you found peace in the place you grew up." His eyes flickered with emotion. "I will," he promised. Then after a second, he added, "And I want you to remember that you're part of this place now too. My fiancé, meeting my family, be it small and scattered, it means a lot." A soft warmth enveloped Kim's heart. She reached out, brushing her fingertips across his cheek. "I'll remember," she said. "Always." They fell into a companionable silence, the quilt rustling as they shifted closer, arms draping around each other in the hush of the old cabin. Through the walls, Kim could hear Nora tidying in the kitchen or maybe just moving about, but soon even those faint noises faded, and the hush of the New Hampshire night took over. Kim closed her eyes, nestling into the comfort of Malik's steady warmth. The faint ache of the day's emotional journey lingered, but it no longer felt like a burden, more like a reminder of how far they'd come and how in each other they found the courage to keep going. In the dim glow, Malik pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "Good night," he murmured. "Good night," she returned, voice soft as a sigh. Then, lulled by moonlight and the cabin's silent welcome, Kim let sleep claim her. Outside the window, the wind chime tinkled like a promise, weaving its gentle song into the tapestry of their shared dreams. A story of reconciliation, family ties renewed, and the unwavering bond between two hearts determined to face the future together.
Chapter 22. Morning came gently, bathing the cabin in pale gold. Malik woke to the distant trill of songbirds, their music echoing through the pines. For a moment he forgot where he was. Only the faint creak of floorboards in the hall reminded him that this was his grandfather's cabin, now lovingly maintained by Nora. Closing his eyes, he let the realization settle over him, warm and reassuring. He had come home, and home had opened its door. Kim stirred beside him. He turned to see her stretch with a drowsy smile, the early light catching on her braids. For a beat, they just watched each other, letting the morning hold its quiet promise. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind. Meeting Nora, stepping into the old bedroom, handling his grandfather's journal. A sense of peace gently coursed through him. He hadn't expected an instant resolution, but he'd found something close to belonging. They rose and dressed, slipping down the hallway to find Nora already up, cracking eggs into a well-worn skillet in the kitchen. The smell of coffee mingled with the woodsy scent of the cabin's timbers. She greeted them with a hesitant smile that relaxed into genuine warmth as she motioned for them to sit. "I'm making breakfast," Nora said. "I figured you'd want to eat before you head out, or stay if you like." Malik exchanged a glance with Kim. They'd talked late into the night about next steps. Their plan involved continuing to explore a few more parks out west, but now there was talk of returning here again. Maybe soon, maybe for a bigger stretch, and maybe, if the stars aligned, for their small, intimate wedding. He cleared his throat, heart thumping a little. "We'll probably take off after breakfast," he said softly, meeting Nora's eyes. "But not for long. Kim and we'd like to come back." His voice caught, but he forged on. "We want to make this place part of our future, if that's okay with you." Nora's brows lifted, relief and excitement flickering across her features. "I'd love that," she said, flipping an egg and sliding it onto a plate. "You can come whenever you want. Maybe we can figure out a schedule so I'm not always hogging the place. It's your family cabin, too." Kim joined in, voice quiet but confident. "We were even thinking we might celebrate our wedding here. Not a big event, just friends, maybe some from Malik's hometown. Rochelle and the others would love a road trip." "That sounds wonderful," Nora said, offering a small, earnest grin. "You've got yourself a deal." Breakfast passed in easy conversation, a bright departure from the tension of the day before. They talked about little improvements Nora had in mind, patching a leaky roof before winter, planting an herb garden in the spring. Malik offered suggestions, recalling his grandfather's old tips for bracing cabins against the harsh New England cold. Kim pitched creative ideas for merging natural elements with modern flair, her excitement bridging new territory as she considered how her own style might blend with the rustic cabin aesthetic. By the time they cleaned up, the sun stood high, illuminating every nook of the cabin with golden clarity. Outside, the wind chime tinkled, as though blessing this quiet pact they'd formed. Malik and Kim stowed their overnight bags in the SUV, then lingered by the open trunk, reluctance tugging at their feet. "Thank you," Malik said to Nora, voice thick with gratitude, "for letting me in and for caring for this place. It means more than I can say." Nora gave a shy shrug. "Guess it was meant to be. Just keep in touch, okay? No more silent years." He nodded, emotion building behind his ribcage. "No more silent years," he echoed, and Nora's shy smile deepened. Kim wrapped Nora in a brief hug, whispering her thanks as well, then stepped aside to let Malik offer his own. Hugging Nora felt surreal. Until this trip, they'd been strangers, but as she returned the embrace, he sensed genuine warmth there. Soon enough, he and Kim climbed into the SUV. The engine rumbled softly to life. Malik let the window down, breathing in the pine-tinged air one more time. Nora stood on the porch, leaning against the railing, and waved as they pulled away. Kim rested a hand on his forearm, offering a supportive squeeze. "How are you feeling?" He cast her a sideways glance, a gentle, content smile creeping in. "Like something that was broken has started to mend, and it's thanks to you, too." She mirrored his smile, turning her attention to the winding path ahead. The pines soon parted, revealing the dirt road that led back to the main route, back toward the broader world they still wanted to explore. Malik navigated slowly, eyes roaming the land that had once been his entire universe. Now it felt bigger than ever, a place with room enough for new memories alongside the old. Once the SUV reached the paved highway, Malik accelerated, the hum of travel settling back into a familiar rhythm. A sense of closure folded into his heart, mingling with the thrill of tomorrow. Yes, they had more parks to see, more people to meet, and an eventual wedding to plan. But now, he carried a lighter spirit, no longer weighed down by guilt or unfinished business. He wasn't leaving his past behind. He was weaving it into the life he and Kim shared. As the road unfurled before them, Malik cast a final glance in the rearview mirror at the fading shape of New Hampshire's pines. A small pang of longing accompanied the knowledge that they'd return soon, for a day or a week or maybe even longer. Kim reached over, lacing her fingers through his, and he welcomed the warmth of her touch. "Where to next?" she asked lightly. He grinned. "Wherever the road calls us," he said, "but eventually back here." Her eyes sparkled, and he felt the familiar joy spark between them. With that simple vow, they pressed forward into the open horizon. The future waited, full of promise and discovery. And this time, Malik felt ready, secure in the knowledge that family, love, and memory could share the same hearth, forging new beginnings where once there had only been distance.
This concludes the Love Between Us bonus story, a Sweet Gum Meadows, sweet African-American romance short story novella, written by Imani Price, narrated by Shatrice Williams and Michael Evans. If you'd like to listen to more stories, please subscribe to this channel or visit imaniprice.com.